initiated by the European Commission. It escalates our challenges around sustainability to the global agenda where it actually belongs to. And the reasons for that are obvious. In our globalized world, where everything is interconnected, best practices have no borders, neither in space nor in time. How we run our businesses has crucial impact, not only on immediate business performance, but also on people, societies, and economies worldwide. And we must not forget, although we are free to make our choices, we're not free from the consequences. And when we talk about our business practices, we cannot just talk and look at the immediate outcomes. We must look at the big picture. There is no planet B. Whatever we do, we must minimize the footprint on our fragile planet. This is also what Andy and I were discussing with world-leading experts during the World Economic Forum last week up in Davos. It is our top responsibility today to find the most innovative practices and applications that pave our ways into a sustainable future. This is also when emerging technologies come into play. They have a fundamental role in making processes more effective and products greener while minimizing waste and lowering the use of costs. We have close to 3,000 people registered for this conference. We also see that people are tuning in via our streaming link. This clearly shows the high interest in the topic. With no doubt, we are in the same boat. Wherever we are and wherever we do has an impact both on macro as well as on micro levels. So dear audience around the world, thank you for being an active part of this future-driven community, and thank you for being here with us today. We feel privileged to count you amongst our over 500,000 AI enthusiasts in over 100 countries. Please share with us in the chat where you're dialing in from and what drawn you here today. Let's get the discussion going in the chat. Share your thoughts and your motivation, and also how you see your personal role in the ecosystem. Feel free to connect with our AI peers and the conference speakers also on social media. Many of us are using LinkedIn, so find each other and make sure you're continuing the discussion after this conference. We can only do so much in 3 hours here. So it is really up to you to drive this forward. Our team does its best to connect you all in the global network and bring you to the latest AI news on a daily basis. We regularly bring AI leaders and domain experts together, either here publicly or in our exclusive boardroom discussions. We share best practices and worst failures, highlight successes and potentials of cognitive technologies by considering all aspects. So let's all wade in. It is a global deal that we are all part of and all need to contribute to. That brings me directly to our speakers of today, 22 leaders and experts who are eager to share how they experience cognitive technologies driving sustainability in different organizations and industries today and what their potentials are in the future. And you know us already. We don't only highlight the best practice, we also transparently focus on challenges and risks. After all, life is not a bed of roses. And when it comes to technologies as well, it is also a double-edged sword. And it is us, human beings, that can make a difference and ensure that we advance our tools in ways so they augment our abilities and capabilities to our best benefit. With the World Economic Forum just behind us, we want to share with you the key takeaways of the conferences focusing on sustainable development and the role of emerging technologies. And with that thought, let me welcome our first speaker today. Please welcome with me Jayant, who is currently managing the World Economic Forum's Global AI Action Alliance, a collaborative platform to accelerate benefits of AI while mitigating its risk. Jayant, a warm welcome to you on our stage. It was Andy and my great pleasure to meet you in person at the World Economic Forum in Davos last week. Now we feel honored to introduce you to our dear audience. Jayant works with leaders from across the public and private sectors on issues related to technology and AI strategy, deployment, and governance. Jayant has a Bachelor of Technology in Electric Engineering and started his career as a software engineer working for Fortune 500 clients in retail, pharma, and automotive industry. He later transitioned to public policy, served on the board of an educational NGO, and worked on various policy issues with GIZ's Indo-German Environment Program, including new and emerging policy areas like India's law on electric waste recycling. He has a master's in public administration from Columbia University. In his previous roles at the World Economic Forum, he has been instrumental in launching the Forum's Global Lighthouse Network, a network of factories leading on technology and innovation. In this most recent role, he has also helped to build a strategy and operations for the Fortune Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network. Jayant is also part of the strategy team for C4IR India. Jayant, you will share with us the takeaways from the World Economic Forum focusing on AI and its role in meeting the global climate goals. AI in the race to meet the climate goals. The virtual stage is yours.
Well, indeed, it was a great meeting. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you join. And thank you to the staff team. The world lead in Davos, and with the very uncertain geopolitical context, as you're all aware, Brazil in the middle of it, and one of the top agenda items in addition to one in Ukraine was also the associated G crisis and obviously climate change. And these two topics were all of the agenda for leaders, and this includes business leaders as well as government leaders, civil society, practically everyone that we're talking about. And this won't be an exaggeration that probably every discussion that we had on the agenda made some sort of a reference to climate, how technologies have tackled them. And when we talk about climate technologies solving that issue, I think one of the important issues to keep in mind, and I touch upon them, is also the aspects of equity. Who has access to that technology? To what extent is it being made? And what can we do to further improve that situation? When we look at the role of AI and emerging 4IR technologies, and some of that was also discussed in Davos, this discussion is evolving at both a macro level as well as a micro level. And macro levels, some more medium-term solutions. And the reason why I say that is like energy transition, for example. They don't have an easy fix. It's not like you will develop one machine learning-led application that will solve that issue. This requires longer-term systemic changes at both an industry level, as well as much more nuanced and focused discussions with governments, and also investments at an infrastructure level coming from the government side. And this is not to understate the importance of bottom-up. That's why I said this discussion is also evolving at a micro level. There are a number of innovators that are coming up with solutions which are critical to the ecosystem of using 4IR technologies for the climate. And this includes in learning space. Coming back to some of the highlights that emerged at our annual meeting in Davos, I'll share a couple of them. As I said, the entire agenda was full of discussions related to energy security and climate change. But some of the big announcements highlight out, I'll share a couple. So one was these and our joint movers was decarbonize industry and long distance transport sectors, which are responsible for over 30% of global emissions. So that's a big number. And this is, and it is also quite unprecedented. Why is that? This is unprecedented because companies have sent arguably the largest market signal in history lies emerging technologies purchase commitments by 2030. These purchase commitments include items like new zero carbon ships or electric heavy duty trucks. And the number of companies, as well as the size of the companies which have put their weight behind this, is huge. The major sectors of focus for this coalition are carbon dioxide removal, aluminium, aviation, shipping, trucking, and steel. So again, the big consumers consumers of energy, as well as the emitters as we speak. And to put things in perspective, like what is the scale of the challenge that we're talking about? As Dalit mentioned, this is not just about painting a rosy picture here. There is a critical challenge that we're trying to address. To put things into perspective, there's practically only one Swedish plant that currently produces zero emission steel using green hydrogen. So that's the gap that we are trying to bridge here. And of course, technology will play a key role, but there's a long way to get there. And I think there is a demand for concrete action. It's great to set up coalitions, but there's also that concrete action now coming out. This year in Davos, this discussion and the First Movers Coalition was started by John Kerry and Bill Gates, along with First Movers Alphabet, Microsoft, and Salesforce, that collectively committed to 500 million in carbon dioxide removal by investing in relevant technology systems and solutions. And this is also where it's not just the role of private sector, as I was stating earlier, there's a big role for the governments to play here. This is also where governments have to collaborate, sometimes even keeping geopolitical differences aside. So Denmark, India, Italy, Japan, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, and the United Kingdom have all joined the US as government partners to create early markets for clean technologies through the relevant policy measures and also by engaging the private sector. And now coming back to that more sector-specific challenge and keeping in mind the role of bottoms-up innovation, of course, we will have to do these big systems-level change, but also make sure that we are investing in a bottoms-up approach and enabling that ecosystem of innovators. Another example, and this is one of the several impact announcements that came out at the annual meeting in Davos, was a partnership that HCL Technologies, one of the leading software and technology companies in India, signed with the World Economic Forum's innovation platform called Uplink. So HCL has committed around 15 million over a 5-year period to drive innovation and technology development for the freshwater ecosystem in India. And as many of the listeners on this call would be aware, India is one of the most water scarce countries, keeping in mind the population that we have. And this is a good example of enabling that innovation on the ground, even as you look at the issue of water shortage and freshwater ecosystems from more macro lens. So again, bridging this macro and micro and keeping action happening at both levels is super, super important. And now if you do a little bit of a deep dive on artificial intelligence, I mean, over the past half an emerged on the usage of AI for good or using artificial intelligence for climate, for energy efficiency. From an industry and business perspective, there are a number of companies which are exploring this topic. There are a number of innovators which are working specifically on this. An example of that would be a company like Noodle.ai, which is working with companies to help identify the waste that is happening in their value chains and helping them optimize their supply chain and production processes with the goal of making your production and supply chain much more green. And this is just one example. I think this is top of the mind for every company, every manufacturer that is out there. Another example of how this is happening, let's say if we switch to the energy side, is the United Kingdom's National Grid Electricity Systems Operator, ESO. They have recently been using the temporal fusion transformer, which has helped them reduce by 50% the error in electricity demand forecasting. So again, electricity demand forecasting is nothing new to grids. But what we are noticing now is that additional pressure on electricity grid systems. And more, the more data that is being made available along the whole value chain of energy, right from distribution to supply to end consumers, and a lot of changes in the end consumer patterns. like with growing digital media, even listeners listening to this and dialing in and streaming, everything uses energy. So the demand forecasting is rapidly changing, and grid systems and governments also have to be on top of that. So we are increasingly seeing the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence in helping optimize that, with the goal of making grids much more efficient, and also with the goal of working towards net zero. And then the other last example I would say that I would take in this regard is the role of, and again, thousands of examples out there. We could spend a whole day talking about use cases and action that is happening on the ground here. But one other interesting example that I would take here is how data and AI is helping shape the topic of climate modeling, particularly for extreme weather events. Over the last few years, we have seen a number of them happening. This includes floods, this includes wildfires, which has ravaged many parts of the world. And with the more availability of data, including geospatial data and recent attempts to break down data silos, what's happening is that there is more data being made available to train machine learning algorithms for more precise climate modeling. Again, climate modeling and forecasting has been going on for a while. The advantage of machine learning that we have, and the opportunity at stake, is to make those models much more nuanced and precise. And this is not just to predict the climate, this is also to then take subsequent action, which includes taking actions to prevent these things from happening, especially things like wildfires. So it's the whole system of it, which is predicting when they might happen, and when they happen, how do you manage it well? How do you direct resources towards it, including humanitarian response? And this is particularly important if you're also looking at other use cases like flood forecasting. With rising climate change levels, it's becoming important for policymakers to have this data at time so that they can take rapid action and perhaps more proactive, and have a more proactive response that after this unfortunate happened. And again, a number of efforts going on in this field, both at a research level as well as the level of governments and their respective Ministry of Climate Change or Forestry. So efforts like LEAP, which is the Center for Learning the Earth with Artificial Intelligence and Physics, which was recently launched at Columbia University in the US, or more decentralized, democratizing and enabling efforts like the Lacuna Fund, which help researchers and organizations by providing them data sets for doing critical research. And recently they did an effort on providing data sets for climate modeling. So I could go on and on, but this is all to say that this is a very, very critical topic, a topic which requires action at the macro and micro level, which requires action from private sector and governments. And all of us need to come together. But keeping in mind what I said at the beginning, that this is also an equity topic. So making sure these tools are also being made available to the parts of the world where they are traditionally not available. And that's how I would summarize some of the key takeaways from Davos and the criticality of the topic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jayant. Great insights, and especially thank you for sharing it with our global audience. I mean, at the end, as you mentioned, there is only as much as we can share in 10 minutes. So I hope that the audience will reach out and take the opportunity also to read more about what has been discussed during the World Economic Forum. And you mentioned two things I would like just to refer quickly to it. I mean, one of it is we have more data accessible, so we can be proactive with the responses of various problems that we have around the topic of climate, and even much more, as we all know. And what you also mentioned is enabling the ecosystem of innovators. And here, Swiss Cognitive, with its great audience, we are all an active part of this ecosystem. So check out, everyone can take his responsibility or her responsibility, and let's make this happen for the future generation. So ending with that, Jayant, it was our great pleasure having you with us, and especially that we had the opportunity to meet in person after such a long pause of having events in person. So hope to see you soon, and thanks again. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Dear audience, now I'm eager to introduce you to our first panel discussion. In the meantime, also keep the chat going. Watch out for the pop-ups and speaker handouts. They have been uploaded and ready for you to download and distribute in your network. And now to our first expert panel. This discussion has the purpose of giving an overview of current applications of AI in different industries that serve green practices. We will hear about the challenges and future potentials from the perspective of industry and academia and from aspects such as ethics and skills. I'm happy now to welcome you all, Ria, Maria, Alexandria, Thierry, and Fritz. Welcome to our stage. I will start with my dear friend Ria. You will be leading this diverse panel with incredible people on board. And talking about incredible people, Ria, you are certainly one of them. A true inspiration. You are both a mathematician and a classical musician and were a child prodigy. You're currently mentoring technology companies, and as a climate scientist, you coordinate research teams globally. Your expert, sorry, I was just irritated that the picture wasn't you. So now I'm speaking to you. Sorry for that. So your expedition in the South Pacific, tropical cyclones are being featured in a full-length documentary. Your life story as an award-winning scientist and concert pianist has been featured on opera. You are also the author of the book, All Things Are Possible, Unleashing the Superhuman Within. Ria, my dear friend, welcome you on stage. I'm so happy to see you. With you, I want to welcome another dear friend, Alexandra. Alexandra, you are an associate professor and vice president of Kosminski University, responsible for international relations and ESR, as well as a senior research associate at the Harvard Labor and Work-Life Program. You received your PhD in the field of philosophy of AI at the Institute of Philosophy of the University of Warsaw. You are the head of the Human-Machine Interaction Research Center at Kosminski University and the leader of the AI and Management Program. Until recently, you have conducted postdoctoral research at the Center of Collective Intelligence at the MIT in Boston. In 2021, you joined the American Institute for Economic Research as visiting research fellow. You're interested in the future of work seen through the lens of emerging technologies as well as in natural language processing, humanoid artificial intelligence, social robots, and variable technologies. You're also the co-author of Collaborative Society. Alexandra, as always, we're very pleased to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Now we're coming to Maria. You are a globally recognized award-winning AI ethic expert, public policy contributor, a member of various advisory boards, such as the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on AI, Orbit and Schema AI Institute, vice chair of the Tech UK Data and AI Leadership Committee. You're a passionate advocate for children's rights in the age of AI and serve as a member of the advisory board for UNICEF AI for Children and the World Economic Forum Generation AI programs. You're also PwC's responsible AI lead, managing the company's efforts in deploying responsible AI and data across UK businesses, its operations, and clients. Maria, it's really nice to have you here on this global stage. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me here.
Thank you. Then we're coming to Thierry. What a great pleasure to see you again on our stage, Thierry. I can hardly wait to hear what you will share with us today. So, my dear audience, what you need to know about Thierry. Thierry is running Oracle Business Value and Strategy team across EMEA. He builds on experience at the interface of business and IT in several sectors and industries. Before joining Oracle, he was an engagement manager at McKinsey in Europe, North America, and Africa, and a visiting researcher at NAC Tokyo. Before that, he worked for two Swiss banks in the IT and strategy department. He holds a PhD in computer science and AI from the University of Zurich and a Master of Science in Computer Science from the ETH Zurich. In his spare time, he spends as much time as possible with his family and outdoors, or he programs web and machine learning application. Thierry, it is an honor to have you with us on this global stage. Fritz.
As always, I feel humbled. Thank you.
Thank you too. Now, Fritz, last but certainly not least, dear audience, here is a bit of insights to Fritz's background. Fritz is a business community builder with a passion for bringing people together in the digital age. His goal is to explore the interaction of information technology, innovation, and impact. He has initiated and helped run a number of international communities focused on linking information technology, innovation, and impact. His current responsibility include chair of the Institute of Accountability in the Digital Age. He held various marketing and alliance positions such as CIO Net, where he was the Secretary General International Relations, a community of over 7,000 CIOs, where he represented the community with international institutes like the European Commission. He is initiator of the Global Digital Leader Alliance, linking over 20,000 digital leaders from around the world. Fritz is also a founding member and vice chair of the Outreach Committee of the ITU AI for Global Good Summit in Geneva. Fritz, it's a great journey that you are on. I'm glad that we can have you on our stage sharing your insights with our community. So welcome to all of you.
An honor to be here.
Thank you. Ria, the virtual stage is yours and to your panelists.
Thank you very much, Dalith, for such wonderful introductions. Today's panel topic is on driving sustainable practices with AI, as we'll be gleaning top industry insights. Sustainability can be defined as the property of biological systems to remain diverse and to be productive indefinitely. And so a sustainable product or service or company would be that which is not detrimental to the larger system in its life cycle, whether it's from production to processing its waste, so that this production can continue for a very long time. So sustainability is not just good for the planet, but it's good for our businesses as well. And this panel has identified that there are a couple of factors that are vital to maintaining sustainability. One of these factors is that we cannot achieve sustainable goals without accountability. And so we're going to be going deeper into this aspect of accountability. Another aspect that we're going to be diving into is the fact that we have this thesis that we need technology combined with human expertise to achieve sustainable goals. And so AI is an absolutely vital, necessary, crucial technology in helping us to attain this. So I am just going to get right into the questions for our esteemed panelists. Our first question is to Alexandra. Could you kick this off by telling us how AI is used today in sustainability?
Thank you so much, Ria. And again, very, very happy to be here. Well, I think it's honest to say that obviously artificial intelligence has this, I would say, is a double sword, or has two sort of, in a way, faces. Because on one hand, we can see multiple efforts to use the predictive power of artificial intelligence, let's say in agriculture and various other areas, to actually achieve greater sustainability. We see questions of better optimization of resources that can be successfully tackled with the usage of machine learning algorithms, as those that are happening also to achieve greater sustainability. On the other hand, obviously, machine learning, and in particular, I would say deep learning, is extremely energy greedy, right? I have even once encountered very recently a statement by an official of a very big technological company who said that each and every academic paper where artificial intelligence is intensively used to solve a problem should actually present its own carbon footprint because of that. So I think it's obviously important to address both of these, but nonetheless, we I think have seen, particularly in the pandemic, more and more pressure to see beneficial outcomes of using artificial intelligence. So whereas earlier on everybody was mostly focused on how to reap business value from artificial intelligence, have a better segmentation, have new revenue streams, achieve some sort of significant cost reduction thanks to the usage of artificial intelligence in the pandemic, in the context of public health. But later on, also in the context of climate, we've seen more and more interest groups actually, expressing that they would like to see AI playing an important role in, achieving sustainability, tackling the climate crisis. And I do think I have seen very interesting works, for instance, around carbon credits and calculating exact amount of carbon credits you would need to purchase in order to be even with the environment when you are building something. With the usage of artificial intelligence, we've seen some very interesting applications, as I said, for instance, when it comes to drought prediction in agriculture. And we are seeing very interesting work in the field of resource and energy optimization with the use of deep learning, very advanced neural networks. So there are plenty of emerging applications. I don't think we are far ahead in this process. We are just beginning, maybe too late, but thankfully, at least we are starting to work on this issue. And I do think that we will be seeing more and more in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So appreciate your insights there on that convergence between AI and sustainability. My next question is from Maria. What progress have we made in terms of the development of responsible AI?
That's a very good question, and thank you for asking. A pleasure to be here. As I said, I've been working on responsible AI for the past 5 years, and with our global team, we've been tapped very much into what really happens in the industry, not just in tech industry, but all the other organizations, large or small, public or private, that are looking to use AI to address various business or societal problems. And I think the past 5 years has been not only very exciting, but in a way a bit terrifying. Exciting because we have learned much more about what AI is, what artificial AI is in a specific context. The fact that we are dealing with a non-deterministic technology that starts messing up with our linear and deterministic processes within all organizations, and that comes with a little bit of a challenge for executives, not only to acknowledge that AI it's not only delivering efficiencies within a set process, but disrupting processes with that system at large. So that's where the first progress is, understanding that is not just about efficiency, it's about disruption. The second one, which I believe is probably the most important lesson we have seen being learned across the board, is the fact that AI, with its agency and a capacity to adapt, to interact with external context, has an impact that is much more profound than was originally thought. And understanding that impact on groups, on individuals, on local communities and society at large has to be part of how we assess, how we develop, and how we use an AI solution. And I've seen a lot of organizations going through the journey of understanding that once you bring a technology as powerful like AI, you more likely have to start taking up responsibility of its impact above and beyond the boundaries of your traditional responsibility, if you want. So much so that Brad Smith talks about the extended responsibility that companies have to have. So being able to manage the impact and understanding how to mitigate the risk it's now becoming more and more of a BAU, business as usual. And lastly, um, the journey towards responsible AI is not a one-off, it's a journey that is slow and at times is painful, because we're talking about fundamentally changing how data scientists and engineers think about technology, about really putting the impact and the human at the center of their develop. The fact that when they crunch personal data, it's not just numbers on a screen. We're talking about people's life, and that's like a stark and terrifying realization for many of them who are not even trained to have this on the back of their minds. Yet, many companies are producing organizational capabilities to support their engineers deal with this impact by providing them with training, with resources, with policy, with guidelines, and all these learnings we hope that will be transferable not just to the future or the applications of AI in across the industries and use cases, but other technologies. Why not apply the same learnings to metaverse or any other technology that's coming? Since we've learned so much of how to address the positive and negative implication of technology as powerful as AI.
Thank you very much for those great insights on what we're seeing as far as the trends in terms of responsible AI. My next question is to Thierry. What do you feel is the level of concern about sustainability and social factors among businesses?
So given the context we're in today, I will aim to be as fact-based and data-driven as possible. And I will actually cite data from a study that was released just now in 2022 on ESG and AI, with a total of 11,005 global respondents from 15 countries. So if we look at that, significant group of people, 93% believe that sustainability and social factors are more important than ever. And a large majority of them, actually almost 80%, are frustrated with the lack of progress by businesses on these initiatives. And you asked me about how I feel. I think that's a feeling that people have, but it's a little bit hard to grasp. And then we need to figure out why that happens and how we can substantiate that. Now, interestingly, more than 90% of business leaders say that they would trust a bot over a human to make sustainability and social decisions. So more than 90%, imagine that, from all the respondents. But of course, it's not trivial to use those bots or AI in the right places, as we've just heard from Alexandra and Maria. And a significant change program is required to also increase the acceptance and the right application of such an AI.
Thank you very much for those insights, particularly in terms of bots. That's so interesting. Maria, I'd like to go back to you and ask, we're going to ask kind of snappy questions as we're running out of, as we're getting close to time. How are private organizations capitalizing upon the opportunity to engage with agents of change to drive meaningful change?
I was on mute. Apologies. I would say quite timidly, but I think there's more openness to bring perspective and diverse voices into fold. First, start with the internal activists. As we are in the middle of a cultural revolution, many organizations are tapping into listening to their voices. More junior staff that were about bringing different perspectives that were not really considered before. But also, we can see that even external perspectives are being considered, but I would say much not as fast as we would like to. But that's very much linked with the fact that you have to have intentional engagement. You can't just open up conversations or perspective if you don't have a system which will translate that engagement into meaningful actions and being able to demonstrate the action so that you can build relationship with those external party, being advocacy groups, being local communities or representatives of civil society, that will actually make a difference. And I'm excited to see that the tides are changing, that more executives are considering, but it's very early stages.
Thank you very much for your insights. I'd like to go to Fritz with that point. Accountability is a big part of business reporting, particularly in ESG, environmental, social, and governance reporting. So, why is accountability such an issue?
Well, what's an issue is it's accountability in the digital age, which is an issue. In a sense, what we're seeing with all these technologies we've mentioned, because it's not only AI, it applies to others mentioned earlier today as well. The technology is moving so fast that the legal and regulatory framework just cannot keep up. And what I mean by that is also actually the people developing those legal and regulatory frameworks. So that growing gap that was recognized in 2016-17 by UNESCO, and they realized that their member states started to complain, hey, this technology, which is confronting us with situations we've never thought of, it's allowing opportunities we have to deal with. And more specifically, it's crossing borders. Digital technology doesn't recognize a border. So one person could do damage in another country using digital technology. So UNESCO decided to develop a multi-stakeholder global platform to deal with accountability and see how we can mitigate that gap. Because the big issue is the legal and regulatory framework, I would say, is analog and it's just moving at a slower pace. That's why we need to think about specifically accountability in the digital age, how we're going to mitigate the risk technology brings if you use it in the wrong manner.
Very great points there. I'd like to now go to Thierry. What happens if companies do not clearly address ESG challenges and hold themselves accountable, as what Fritz was saying?
Yeah, I think it's quite striking how people would actually react if you ask them, much stronger than I expected, in fact. If we go back to the study, and by the way, you'll get the study through the handouts, or probably it's linked somewhere, maybe even around this window here. 70% of people would be willing to cancel their relationship with a brand, even if they had a very strong relationship, with a brand that does not take sustainability and social initiatives seriously. And 69% would even leave their current company to work for a brand that places a greater focus on these efforts. So, more than 2/3 of people changing their jobs if ESG is not made accountable and measured. If organizations can clearly demonstrate this progress that they're making on those issues, people will be much more willing to pay a premium for their products and services. Again, almost 90% say that, and invest in them or actually work for them. So it's not only a question about, feeling good, it's a question about making money and not losing employees.
Thank you very much for those very intriguing statistics. Fritz, how do you feel that AI can help us in actually, let me back up and say what
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to know what the dimensions are that we should consider in terms of accountability. What are those dimensions that we should be considering?
Yeah, good question. Because if you talk about accountability in the digital age, accountability, it's not something it's not a tick in a box. Once you've met accountability, you're done. So first of all, accountability is something you have to monitor on the long term, that you continuously assess, is it still doing what I set out to do? And has the operating environment changed in such a manner that maybe we're using the wrong system? So that also means, so it's a continuous review. Secondly, should have actually begun with that. You have to define what it's actually meant for. So you have to state and be accountable. Look, we've designed an AI engine, and we want it to do this particular it has this purpose, and you have to then assess: do you know if it's working or not? So you have to assess: does it meet the intended goals you set out to do? Now, AI goes in hand with data. So you also have to understand what type of data are you putting in that system, and not only to train the system, but also in the actual operation, what's happening, to what extent is it biased or not. And finally, you need to have an overall governance structure in place to make certain that you document and demonstrate that you are striving to uphold the right ethical values and ensure compliance with those standards you've yet yourself. So you have to be quite transparent to do that, because we have to realize accountability is the fundamental prerequisite where, and if you look at the definition of accountability, that's something I think we should mention here as well. It's an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's action. That applies for individuals. You cannot hold a system accountable. It's always the person at the end of the day. And once you have transparency, then you can talk about, okay, is it inclusive? Is it secure enough? Is it private enough? Is it reliable or fair? So the fundamental prerequisite of a system is accountability. That's where all these other prerequisites are built on.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Fritz. It's great to hear these perspectives because we have two things going on here in this
Yeah.
panel. One is the digital transformation aspect, which requires accountability, and then also the climate and sustainability aspect, which requires accountability. So there's accountability all across the board in this space. Now, I'd like to kind of shift the discussion a little bit to the applications of AI and how AI can be used in terms of achieving sustainability. So I'd like to go to Alexandra. Can you address why and how we can make AI more human centric to achieve sustainability?
Well, yeah, well, I do think that we've spoken about it quite a bit already regarding sustainability and, how artificial intelligence can become an important technology in this landscape. Optimization issues, prediction issues. These obviously will play a very important role, I think, in achieving ESG goals. And you can think here about many different, obviously, types of algorithms. You can think about more simple algorithms, supervised learning. You can think about most advanced neural networks that will probably be those technologies that we will select to, try and solve harder optimization issues in areas like agriculture or logistics. And several others. I would say that perhaps this human centric aspect of artificial intelligence has quite a lot to do with what we're seeing right now regarding accessibility. We see more and more low code artificial intelligence, no code artificial intelligence. So we see how certain barriers are lifted and how AI can become a tool of choice for people who are not necessarily prepared or have not been prepared in the past to use AI because it was very difficult. It had many barriers. There was the formal language barrier and then algorithms, and many people did not have enough time or could not really, for various reasons, step on this pathway towards excellency in artificial intelligence. Currently, those barriers are being lifted. And finally, perhaps this human-centric aspect of artificial intelligence today that we're rediscovering, I think, has a lot to do with how we want to put humans in the loop, how we want to make humans really the decision makers regarding artificial intelligence and how it's being applied, and how do we want to address various challenges using artificial intelligence. So I think, I see it, for instance, in the area of collaborative artificial intelligence, where we are not trying to delegate all the tasks to AI, but rather collaborate with it, right? Where human is still in the loop and human is still at the center. So there are a couple of different things I think that can play a role here.
Thank you very much for those insights. That leads me to another question here. Thierry, which role do business leaders think that AI and bots can take in sustainability and social decisions?
I'd like to build on a couple of points from Alexandra. Let's quickly step aside and look at the human in a minute. But what sophisticated algorithms can do well is collecting data and under some circumstance detect patterns, even if the question at hand is not well formulated. That could be an important role that humans struggle with, next to things like getting tired or making human mistakes. And more concretely, the top areas that business leaders mention where they need assistance is verifying data, is automatically collecting data from different areas, including partners and the supply chain, planning and revising targets based on performance, automating reports and analysis, which is a very old problem that is being tackled in more sophisticated ways now. The same business leaders believe that bots are better at collecting data without error. So, even in simple stuff like transcripts, making unbiased decisions, and I'll quickly build on that, and predicting future outcomes potentially, if it's well defined. As Alexandra mentioned, there's still a place for humans in those efforts, though, and it should be, if we look at the facts. Humans are still needed for things like implementing change based on feedback, especially if something has not been anticipated in the algorithms, educating others on context needed to make decisions, or making context-informed strategic decisions. Context will remain a challenging problem for AI for a while. A factor I'd just like to re-emphasize is human bias. So while all those operational things are significant, nearly all business leaders that I spoke with admit that human bias and emotion often distracts from the goal of ESG, especially ESG goals, and some of them are very long-term. And people believe that humans are too lazy or selfish to save the planet, and there's too much focus on short-term profits in many contexts. And this is something that potentially algorithms could be targeted towards.
Thank you very much for those great insights. I'd like to ask Fritz, how do you feel that AI can help us in achieving sustainability through the lens of accountability?
Well, maybe a small commercial break here. I would point everybody to the AI for Good global initiative from the ITU, because we've been running that now since 2017, and I mean, now on a weekly basis, you get loads and loads of examples where AI can add value in virtually any field out there for any SDG. All 17 SDGs are positively affected if you apply AI. So too much examples, I would say, are available. But then again, that's also what I think, I don't know, as Cherry Alexander mentioned that, provided that the system is unbiased, that it is an unbiased data set you're using, an unbiased algorithm. So that it still has to meet a couple of prerequisites provided by the people who build them. But once you have the right engines, you just go to AI for Good at the ITU, loads of examples in any field. And interestingly enough, medicine is leading the field at the moment. They have the most benefit at the moment with using AI engines.
Thank you very much for those examples, Fritz.
Yeah. Sorry, you were frozen a bit. Sorry.
Thank you very much for those examples. Yeah. Alexandra, can you talk about optimization versus prediction for AI's usage in achieving sustainable goals?
Well, of course, and I think again, these are the issues that we already started discussing. We can most certainly say that both goals can be achieved with the usage of various machine learning algorithms, various deep learning algorithms, and we have seen very successful cases of resource optimization, in particular, for instance, energy that is used on the servers that can be optimized with the usage of most advanced neural networks today and really save energy, well, in a very significant manner, right? So that's one thing. The other is prediction, as we've been mentioning. I think in COVID, many of us have faced this very interesting example of a system that was actually capable of making a fairly accurate prediction of a possible spread of the epidemic in Wuhan, and it detected an early signal of change that was still invisible to humans. So equally, we could say that we can find interesting applications when it comes to predictions, for instance, regarding weather, with the usage of artificial intelligence. So I do think that the leaders, both in governments, in public administration, in various other domains, will be looking at both of these options in the future, both options, right? Optimization regarding internal processes, internal issues within the organization, the way products are built, the way services are being disseminated, but also prediction to see where the market is going and how to achieve sustainability goals that you can include really as parameters in the model that you're building. So I think both pathways are equally important here.
Thank you very much. As our last comment here, I'd like to just ask Maria what lessons we've learned from AI development and use so far for AI and sustainability. And we just have a couple minutes left here.
Thank you, Rian. What a great way to close. I think Fritz, Alexandra, and Thierry have made such great points on what we have learned so far. But I would just like to summarize. We know much more about what artificial intelligence is and isn't. I think we've learned a lot about the limitation of this technology and where it works and where it doesn't, and the fact it's not a panacea. But in the same time, the technology that's been deployed so far has helped us see the flaws with humanity. And the fact that we can see where even more basic type of technology like static algorithms have been used to discriminate people, to enforce inequality and other evils of society around the world. And bringing this to light, we have a real chance to address this. So it's a very exciting moment in our history to be able to not only to acknowledge more honest and transparent the societal problems we have, but also we have tools that can help us address that as well.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'd like to just go round robin here, just a 30-second quick snippet from each of you as a closing comment. Alexandra, can you give us a closing remark?
Well, I would just say that I am very excited about, the real possibility of applying artificial intelligence to particularly climate issues and achieving sustainability by organizations. I think we now have a realistic start that this became a real issue of concern, issue of implementation of new methods and new tools. And I am definitely looking forward to the next couple of years where AI hopefully will be, kind of, in a way, reveal its potential in the ESG area.
Exactly. It'll reveal its potential in the ESG area. Fritz, can you give us a closing remark?
I'll try to keep it brief, but this whole discussion also reminds me of a book which was the Financial Times Management Book of the Year from Professor Alex Edmonds, Grow the Pie, which aligns profit and purpose. And once businesses realize that if you take a long-term view, you have to align profit and purpose. And I think that's the thinking we should take on board when we apply AI in our own organizations. It has to do good because his research shows that if you do good, you're actually going to be a much more profitable company. So it's not just using AI, it's actually good for your business if you take the long-term view.
That's right, the long-term view. And Maria, do you have a closing remark for us?
Yeah, I'll try to be short. I would like us to remain focus on delivering responsible AI and not move to the next glitzy technology that we are seeing widely discussed around. There's so many things we need to solve in relation to AI and how it's being used. So let's remain focused. Let's continue the conversation. And thank you so much, guys, the Swiss Cognitive, for inviting us and for carrying up the conversation. Just because metaverse is fashionable now, we shouldn't really ignore that we haven't really it's the beginning of the road for artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And Thierry, what would be your closing remarks for us?
So I believe we will require a combination of AI and human heuristics for good to accelerate our path in ESG. We need both. And it's also not a matter of planet or profit. Businesses can prioritize both at the same time. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. I love that. Thank you very much for such an enlightening, wonderful panel from our thought leaders here today. If you'd like to learn more, you can certainly refer to the Swiss Cognitive website. Also, incredible content, incredible articles, and events. And so I'd like to pass the baton back to Swiss Cognitive. Daleth, thank you very much.
Wow, thanks to all of you. That were just incredible 30 minutes, and we could go on and on and on. You all have such a vast knowledge and experience. Although we're late on time, Ria, I know you are an expert yourself. I would like to give you also one sentence. What would be your takeaway out of this discussion?
Oh, thank you very much. My takeaway out of this discussion is that we are just beginning. We are just at the beginning of our journey in terms of discovering the potential of what AI can do for us in this field of ESG, in the field of climate and sustainability. And so I too am extremely excited to see what lies ahead. And I think that AI is definitely going to crack a lot of nuts in this sense of solving the problems that are the most important for us today in the climate crisis.
Great, thanks a lot. So, besides focus, and as I always say, we have now the chance to unbias the bias. We have also to crack the nuts. Ria, Maria, Alexandra, Fritz, and Thierry, once again, a huge thank you for your insights and commitment. Keep the great work and wipe. Dear audience, feel free to connect with them on social media, reach out with your question and discussions. We have quite some real experts here on stage. Thanks and see you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, dear audience, let me keep this wipe going and jump directly to our next keynote speaker, Francesco, who is leading us today into the topic of economic competitive advantage driven by technological social responsibility and AI. Francesco, a warm welcome to you from the Swiss Cognitive team and the global AI community. Let me introduce you to them and hand it over then to you straight away. Dear audience, Francesco is a director
I'm having
of
like terrific responses to it. I mean,
oh, hold on, they are here. I might just log it
hold
out.
on. I think there is like a short. Yep, I will go back. So Francesco is the director of the John Cabot University Institute of Future and Innovation Studies. He is an executive board member of the Global Alliance for Digital Governance, hosted by the Harvard University and MIT, and coordinated by the Boston Global Forum, a former Mozilla Ford Foundation research fellow. Francesco is a visiting professor at the New York University and former associate professor of Seabed University, Denmark. He has recently published his new book that is also available for you to download here on our platform. Our Common AI Future, a geopolitical analysis and roadmap for AI-driven sustainable development, science and data diplomacy. His work at the Institute and his publications focuses on emerging technologies, innovation, governance, and standardization processes, ethics, and impact assessment, new technologies, policy, and geopolitics. Dear Francesco, please take us into the world of economic competitive advantage that is driven by technological social responsibility and AI. The virtual stage is yours.
So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. Obviously, because you can understand from my book that was recently published that I have a long-term interest in the topic, and I'm really glad that so many talented people are engaging with the topic. For the presentation of today, I've prepared some notes to try to stay on time and try to present a certain amount of content. So in the few minutes I have, I'd like to discuss three key ideas that I think could help AI become a promising tool for tackling the sustainable development goals and guiding a truly global Green New Deal. So one, economic solidarity and socially responsible innovation. So as we progress through human history and into different eras of industrial revolutions, we can see that technological innovation, energy use, and economic growth all move in the same direction at the same time. This economic model has resulted in enormously transformative social processes that have been extremely beneficial to a portion of humanity, but socially costly for societies that have been unable to benefit from these evolutions. Throughout history, humanity has always competed and fought for limited resources, and technology has provided the few the tools they need to compete with nature or to outcompete other humans for an ever-increasing share of these limited resources. The new technological cycle based on the new green energy systems and applications appear poised to repeat many of the same systematic errors. The green agenda, at least according to me, as it seems to be defined right now globally, will clearly benefit some countries more than others and possibly not really solve the problems it is set out to tackle. When better energy standards are developed and imposed on a global scale, countries that pioneer these emerging technological standards gain a significant competitive advantage. When some countries or economic actors or interests push for the world to adopt higher standards like green standards, this creates economic pressures that affects everyone, but to different degrees. The cost of gaining access to these new technologies and energy systems will determine the actual potential or economic barriers for developing countries around the world to use AI, alternative energy systems, clean electricity, and green technology as social and economic change catalysts, like it done for our society. A true and ethical green agenda can only be organized globally, can only be based on economic solidarity measures and social responsible technological innovation and planning, in which the early innovators and polluters create new technological sustainable development models that support other nations' right to achieve the same social, technological, and economic advancements. Sustainable development requires a systematic global approach, new methodologies, new scientific approaches, new technological solutions, and a more coherent global political movement that questions the first to markets leads all approach and questions the larger context of this crisis. As a society that pioneered this technological transformation accelerate the transition to the next technological era, powered by AI and fueled by new types of energy sources, such as data, questions arise about the model that has guided humanity's historical transformations, and pressures mount to ensure that we understand the risks and avoid the old patterns. We must ensure that data do not become the next form of pollution, and that AI development does not endanger the planet and humanity. We must reduce data waste while also ensuring that AI systems maximize the scientific and social utility of globally collected scientific and citizens' data, as well as evaluate the fact that this AI-driven transformation will happen in social and economic settings that are very different from one another. To make meaningful progress in addressing the challenges of sustainable development requires the ability to integrate macro sustainability goals and high-tech solutions with locally developed micro solutions and low-tech alternatives. So the first takeaway, if you want to be an actor of social change in the AI sustainable development, design or adopt AI systems that are scalable and economically diverse. So in my book, Our Common AI Future, I describe a detailed roadmap based on a number of existing policies and best practices for AI-driven sustainable development. For the limited purposes of this presentation, I want to specifically focus on two interconnected dimensions that I believe to be particularly important. One is complexity theories, and the other is open and fair data principles and tools. So point number two, complexity theories will be the new standard in science and the future of AI. The pandemic sparked a global debate on how government can avoid the disastrous effect of not sharing scientific data and information globally and promptly. It showed that the need for new scientific system theories and complex data models that can analyze complex data in real time. AI could help develop complex system analysis and new economic and social theories to explain complex behaviors. AI systems can be built on nonlinear systems and logic, offering a unique opportunity, and they could handle complex analysis in unprecedented ways. AI are designed to be constantly expanded and transformed by new and diverse data, and trained to process diverse data qualities in meaningful ways to solve complex systems and questions. Complexity science and nonlinear logic underpin AIs. AI reason that and purpose should be based on the unique qualities and abilities of machines to process and analyze real-world big data, as well as their ability to project complex, augmented, and virtual worlds, and should be designed to be human-centric. What I mean by human-centric is conceived as powerful tools and interfaces designed to interact and collaborate with humans in cognitively deep and rich ways in order to enhance human ability to process complex data systems. These scientific approaches to complex and nonlinear thinking might move from math, physics, engineering, and economics and political sciences into a multidimensional and systemic understanding of the deep ecology of technological innovation, or the relationship of technology with humanity, life, and the planet, according to two famous scholars, Capra and Luisi, who have been pioneers in this field. This systemic, holistic, deeply ecological, non-linear, complex perspective, which should be seeked systematically, also be part of education and research, takes on a new significance when considering the relationship between sustainability and AI, where AI can be conceived both as a problem and as a tool to find and elaborate solutions. For example, the 17 goals of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development are an example of complexity. Thinking of the 17 sustainable goals as a systematic agenda for AI development can help developers see AIs as cognitive and analytical tools made to help engineers, biologists, physicists, mathematicians, economists, and others study, analyze, and interact with nonlinear logics, complex processes, and scientific and social challenges that are not area-specific. The UN Sustainable Goals are collective. They are a collection of complex questions and targets that require complex and interconnected solutions. AI development, along with other fourth industrial revolution technologies, can be designed to help to achieve these goals. So the second takeaway of my presentation is engage with complexity theories and models. There's a reason why the recent Nobel Prize was given to a physicist that is at the forefront of complexity theories. So engage with complexity theories and models within your own field of expertise. My book is an example, an attempt at this systematic and complex thinking. In the book, I analyze future narratives, social responsible innovation, science and technology diplomacy, data and AI diplomacy, scientific green zones and red lines, human-centric and trustworthy AI principles and regulations, and an alternative multilateral model for scientific and technological alliances and cooperation, inspired by the visions of the United Nations, our Common Future report, to which I've dedicated a book, that first developed and defined sustainability and carved the path that led to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In the book, I also discuss transformative scientific theories and technological solutions, such as complexity and nonlinear dynamics theories, systematic thinking, and importantly, open and sustainable data, fair data principles and tools, data stewardship, data trusts, green global AI standards. So my third and last point, green AI needs open data and data diplomacy. In my conclusion, I want to particularly focus on the key function that data, the energy source of AI systems, have to fuel sustainable AI innovation. And now creating a global and economically viable model for scientific and personal data exchanges is fundamental for the green economy, scientific discovery, and the common good. Now, the scientific and social benefits of open data exchanges and open science are difficult to argue against, as are the costs of not sharing scientific data, particularly when it comes to publicly funded research, for example. Large amounts of scientific data produced at great public expense are never used again. For example, in medicine, it is claimed that 85% of medical research data is wasted and never used again. This data waste, as well as the cost of reproducing overlapping and duplicate data, as quantifiable scientific, social, and economic costs for society and the planet. And it is in every way equivalent to other types of energy waste. For this perspective, I consider open data as sustainable data that can significantly contribute to the goals of resource organization, waste reduction, optimizing and expediting scientific discovery, increasing social benefits, and contributing to economic growth. The main problem with open data is that they run counter to the competing global political and legislative drive to protect intellectual fair economic competition and the government's role in balancing publicly financed research in relation to fair business investment and interest. I specifically want to single out in my conclusion the 2019 European Agenda for Open Science. That said, the ambition goes to create FAIR, it's an acronym for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data exchanges for scientific research. Now, the difference between open data and fair data is that users have total control about the ways in which their data are used and for what purposes. So I believe that the combination of one global system, as the fair data could be, with platform, for example, personal data trusts, could be a fundamental balance between public interest and personal and commercial interests. To conclude, the climate and health crisis have ignited throughout the world a confrontation between two basic ideologies. One that continues to see the future of the world as dominated by few, and another that understands clearly that we share a common planet and hence a common future, and that the history of humanity is ultimately connected. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Francesco, for your insights. I hope we can keep this going and have you back with us either on the virtual stage or one of our boardrooms. For now, I let you go, and I thank you once again for your commitment to share your experience with our global network. We have one question. I will share it, or we will share it with you in the chat. It would be great if you can get back to the people in the chat because we are a little bit tight on time. So thanks a lot and see you soon.
Thank you.
Now we are on to our next expert panel discussion with some new people in our network, which we are always pleased to see. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to Akos, Nadia, Kilian, Simon, and Adele. Akos, welcome on board. Let me start with the introduction. You will lead this great panel. Akos, you have over 20 years of experience in the government, IT and telecom sector in change management, business development, and digital transformation. Your focus is on fostering the development of digital networks and services, green innovation and tourism, incubating and adopting digital projects in the EU, Western Balkans, and globally, creating and shaping best practice and constantly bringing the channels of digital education and digital transformation. You're also a digital government and service assessor and consultants for UAE governments, as well as one of the founders of the Broadband Foundation and the Digital Future Foundation. Currently, you are a member of the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition at the European Commission. Thanks, Akos, for leading this inspiring panel. Now, please welcome with me, Nadia. Nadia, for the past 2 decades, you have been transforming and contributing to the digital transformation of businesses ranging from the Fortune 100 to SMBs internationally. You were named one of the top 30 most inspiring women in AI in 2021. Congratulations. You developed the success formula for digital transformation and emphasize using AI for humans to achieve better efficiency and productivity, but not just as a human replacement. Your digital transformation and innovation principles are described in your guidebook, Leveraging Digital Transformation. Nadia, thanks for joining us on that stage. Now I'm coming to Kilian. Kilian is our youngest speaker today, representing the young generation. He is passionate about driving systematic change towards solving the climate crisis. He has facilitated workshops on climate change with decision makers at COP26, over 45 different schools and universities, such as IIT Delhi. He communicates the importance of AI to transition society to renewable energy source and for countries to achieve their climate goals. He's also in the ACE working group in UNGO, which is the official UN youth organization, behalf of which he has been chosen to go as representative to the United Nations Conference SB 56. Congratulations on that, Kilian. Last but not least, welcome. Last but not least, he analyzes risk exposure of renewable energy project at Axis. Kilian, it is really nice to have you with us today, especially on such a short notice. Our world can turn upside down sometimes, where flexibility become fundamental. And we actually just reached out to Kilian, I would say about 7 hours ago, even less. So a warm welcome from our side. A warm welcome also to you, Simon. Simon, you have one foot in the industry and another in academia. Not only have you been helping NVIDIA to shape its technology agenda, but you have also been working with the university to develop and train new talents. You also have more than 200 peer review publications and book under your name. You have been with NVIDIA for almost 5 years, and you are their global head of AI Technology Center and AI Nation. Simon, thank you so much for being with us today. With you, we have also Adele. A warm welcome on our stage today. You are the director of GIS and Geosolutions, AI and Emerging Technologies, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. You have made extensive contributions towards Smart City Dubai, the 10X initiative, and Dubai Data Law, and you actively shape the organizational strategy and roadmap of blockchain, AI, robotics, and mixed reality. Huge welcome to you too, and thanks for joining our panel today from Dubai. Akosh, Nadia, Kilian, Simon, and Adele, with the focus on AI needs energy and energy needs AI, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Let's jump into the middle. We have some very interesting questions. And if I may ask all the panelists to try to focus on quick and short answers rather than long answers to each of the questions. If I may, I start with Nadia. The first question, what do you see as the key factors for sustainability in AI? You're muted.
Thank you.
No problem.
What I see as the key factor for sustainability is the relationship between 6 entities. And those 6 entities, they are people, things, the fauna, the flora, other machines or robots in the environment, and the cosmos. Once you have a great relationship in the ecosystem, then you will achieve sustainability with AI.
I like it. That you stress ecosystem of things, ecosystem of not just technology, but also people and the society itself.
Exactly.
Thank you. Adel, the question is for you. Could you please let us know what role utility authorities or companies making in sustainability? Could you give an example in what happens in Dubai with green strategy, and what are the initiatives on that?
Sure. In DIWA, for example, we have a vision to be a globally leading sustainable innovative corporation. So we have sustainability from one side and we have innovation on one side. We play with both, and both have the drivers of all initiatives within the organization. So from sustainability point of view, we drive the objectives to lead Dubai City to become net zero emission carbon footprint by 2050. And that happened through several ambition initiatives, such as Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park is considered the largest single-site solar park in the world. And it has objective to produce a capacity of 5,000 kilowatt by 2030. Moreover, also as a utility company, we encourage our customers to adopt EVs, and we distributed electric vehicle chargers across the city of Dubai. We reached up to 325 electric EV chargers, and also we encourage our residents and our customers to adopt the PVs in their rooftop by installing PVs and link their PVs to the smart grid. Yes.
Thank you for that. Kilian, if I may address the next question to you. So how can you make renewable energy more efficient with AI?
Yeah, so there's a huge opportunity to reduce costs with AI. And for example, I used to work with a utility company called Energia. It was my previous employer, and I was employed as a machine learning engineer. And what I managed to achieve with AI was that 6 months in advance, I could predict if a component was going to break. And this really allows you to reduce costs because it means that you can order your components 6 months in advance and you can store them on site. And also it reduces risks because you can really sort of plan ahead for the component to break. So you can decide to change the component when there's less wind, let's say for wind turbines. Yeah, so I was working looking at wind turbines. That was my specialty, but this could also be used for solar farms and any renewable energy projects. Also, there's a way of using it to predict the amount of energy you can get from different renewable energy projects. So that's also something that can help reduce costs.
Thank you. So AI-driven predictions are playing a key role in the energy sector, that's for sure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kilian. Simon, if I may address the next question to you. So how can AI help to reduce the carbon footprint in high-performance computing? That's a different angle.
Right. Well, as you know, the high-performance computing data centers is getting larger and larger. In fact, the average top 500 supercomputing centers consume an average of 20 megawatts, right? And the reason is basically that you need to run especially large models. What AI can do, and in the mathematical speaking, it can do a reduction of the models. Thus, you can actually run those models with a much smaller machine, or with the same machine, you can run much larger models. So in this case, you can actually reduce the energy footprint.
Interesting. Thanks. So Nadia, back to you with the second question. What are the implications of green AI, if you can say
yes,
that?
Sure. Well, green AI, it's about efficiency. And when I say efficiency, it's efficiency about everything, be it software, devices, machine, robots, data center, robotic warehouses, manufacturing and manufacturing plants. And efficiency should start from the raw material used with the conception and to continue in between to the energy plant, how they are powered, the automation setup, and the operation by everyday user. We should also consider reusability, versatility, and evolution should be considered from the planning and design phase because we are to expect continuous and fast technology evolution with AI. Those are the implications for green AI.
I see. Thank you. Adel, the second question is again to you. So can we have some examples from Dubai on how AI data and cognitive capabilities were introduced to foster sustainability?
Sure. In Dubai, we have more than 1 million electricity consumers and more than 960 water consumers. And we thought the best fit to bring AI is in the frontline services, so that we cut short the unnecessary visits of our consumers to our offices. So we deployed several initiatives in the frontline services to serve our customers with services powered by AI. One of these services was the virtual agent Rammas. Rammas is fully empowered by AI. It's a powerful chatbot where consumers can use the service 24 by 7. They can pay their bills, and the service is available through 6 channels through the website, mobile, Facebook Messenger, Amazon Alexa, Google Home, and so forth. This is one of the services which is powered by AI provided to our customers. Another service which harnesses the data and AI is high water consumption alert. We proactively inform our consumers about the high water consumption and the suspect of leakage within 48 hours before even the consumers know about the leakages. We inform them through SMS, email, and push notifications to make them aware about any suspect of water leakage. In addition to that, also, we introduced a program to our customers. We call it My Sustainable Living Program to encourage them to follow the sustainability standards and to make them aware how much their consumption is compared to the average consumption within their community. Because we came to a conclusion that when we compare the consumption of an individual to the average consumption of others within the community, they become more proactive because the competition here plays a role to become better always. Please.
Great examples. Thank you so much. Killian? So next one will be, how can AI be used to continue, or not to continue, sorry, to continue, yeah, obviously, but to convince governments to implement policies that can help solving climate change, if it can help at all.
Great. So this question relates a bit to my other hat, which is systems thinking and systems design. I'm really interested in regenerative sort of model in which we look at different ways in which we can convince at least politicians to look into ways to really support policies that help climate change. So I've run workshops with a think tank from MIT called Climate Interactive, and they use something called system dynamics to model the different ways in which different policies would actually affect the world, the environment, and it makes predictions until 2100. So the way I'm seeing it is combining systems engineering with AI, we can really improve the models and the predictions, and we can get much better at convincing politicians that the right policies are the ones to go to. For example, something that's really helped with the model, it helps to convince people that planting trees is part of the solution, but it's obviously not the only solution. And it's very important that there's other parts to it, that we multi-solve, that we realize everything's interconnected, and there's many different solutions that are needed to actually be able to reach the Paris Agreement goals.
Challenging, the way I see. I think we all agree on that it's challenging to convince governments, but we never give up. That's for sure. Simon, I'm with you for the next question.
Yes.
How can AI be used for climate modeling? We've seen some examples, but what do you think of prediction changes, predicting dangers? Going back to your first question.
Yes, exactly.
As with high performance computing in connection with that.
Right, exactly. So one of the things that the climatologists they uses high performance computing to do all these predictions. Like what Killian has said, combined with dynamic systems, they do all this prediction. However, in order for us to do very, very details, it require very fine resolution. Now, in order to do that, you need to build. In fact, the prediction is that you need a supercomputer that's about 1 million times the size of what we have right now, which is basically defeat the purpose of climate change, right? In fact, you have more climate footprint. So what is it right now is that the AI, what we call a surrogate model, reduce the model to a smaller size that's enabled, together with the dynamic system, enable the scientists to simulate all this model in much a smaller manner and uses a supercomputer of this the current size, enable for them to predict, and then thus they can actually advise the politicians, the policymakers to make the right decisions.
I would love to see that size of that computer in real life. Really, I try to imagine that size that you mentioned, but it's tough still. Hope once we can see such a supercomputer built and in action to prevent predict challenges and even danger. Thank you, Simon. Nadia, back to you with the third question.
Yes.
If I may.
Yes, you may.
How can we use the AI to reduce carbon footprint? Until that, we are familiar with the answer. But while optimizing production and contributing to the sustainability for the future?
Well, AI itself is a precious help in reducing carbon footprint and optimizing energy performance simply because we can use AI for self-sustainability in every device. We can use machine learning and deep learning functions to determine that efficiency level. In every situation, be it smart cities, domestic use, business use, environmental use, we, from the manufacturer to the consumer, the end user, we should always use self-sustainable practices with AI implementation where we measure, optimize, and economize energy consumption for each operation. We should as well have intelligent setting integrated where the machine can suggest or can automatically switch to the best setting for achieving a desired outcome and based on situational data.
Thanks. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Adele, I'm here for the third question for you. Is when you think of blending data, AI, and automation together, definitely would serve different use cases within a given organization. That's true. Can you elaborate on how to buy utility authorities harnesses the capabilities of automation, customer services, or in customer services?
Sure. Thank you. Well, actually, with the availability and abundance of data and high-end computers, and with the availability of integration with the other public-private entities, we were able more than ever to automate our services and to develop a complete automated cycle of services to the consumers. And we could reach the KPI of smart adoption. We were able to raise the smart adoption to a percentage of 98.5 for the first time. And that happened because of the automation. One of the examples is information NOC. When one of our customers submit a request for permit to start building in Dubai, we are able now to receive the request, process the request, and submit the NOC to the customers with no time. The entire process has become automated, and we could reduce 3 days to instant. This is one of the examples of the automation using data and the power of computing.
Thank you. Excellent. Killian, are diversity and inclusion important aspects of implementing climate change solutions with AI?
Yes, they are. And I think it's important that when we consider AI, we realize that some countries have much higher capabilities in terms of energy, the energy sources they have, and how they're able to implement and use AI. And even more from a standpoint of, from my own experience, well, young generation is going to be affected by climate change disproportionately. So it's really important that they're taken into the conversations on the implementation of AI with energy. And I think it's important that every country should at least be involved in the innovation process, in the implementation, so that we can really scale the solutions. Because I think that's where we'll have a real impact with AI. And I think this goes across the board. We need We need different cultures, we need different people coming in to solve these very complex problems with AI. And I think the biggest challenge is going to be with implementation. So I do think diversity and inclusion should be included.
Thank you, Killian. Simon, just one thing, going back to the previous question, that can you just add maybe one more thought on the prediction challenges and prediction challenges and changes and danger for using the supercomputer which is not built yet?
Right. So the challenges is in terms of its technology. One of them is that when we build a system like this, the semiconductors that is required is very require high tech. We are moving from at the moment right now 4 nano to all the way to in the future, maybe 4 years from now, will be about 2 nanometers. And that basically, which means that you can actually cram in more semiconductors, but the heat will definitely go up, and that is going to cost a lot of energy. So the other aspect of it is that you need to find a way of how to cool the system, and that is also another challenge on how to cool a supercomputing like this. So artificial intelligence would able to use to actually predict on how and optimize the way that the energy is being used, and also to cool the data centers. So that is something that needs to be developed at the meantime. So there is a lot of challenges that require a lot of young people to come in to help to solve all these problems. We do not have a solution yet, by the way.
Yeah, and then we can also use the heat as well, reuse the heat.
Yes, exactly.
As I think we are coming to the end, we don't have time for any more questions, but just only if I may have just one key takeaway from each of you of today. Nadia, please. The floor is yours. Muted.
I will follow with what Simon said. It's about data and measurability. What can be measured can be improved. And today we have a duty to measure our energy consumption. That way we can work on improving our consumption.
Yeah. You are muted.
Yeah. I advise the AI leaders to follow the quote which says, think big, start small, and move fast.
Thanks. Killian?
Yeah, let's convince governments to really invest in AI, finding solutions, and bring as many people as we can from different backgrounds together to solve these solutions. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. And Simon, please. If you end
to add on what Killian has said, I would really like to have more young people being trained in this area to help to solve the problems, because this is the next generation problems.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for today, for being with us. And if you have time, I would love to continue this discussion another time, maybe with you.
All right.
And thank you, Mrs. Cognitive, for organizing such an event. And back to the main stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Akos, Nadia, Killian, Simon, and Adele for being with us today. And dear audience, if you have any particular question, reach out to them via social media. Thanks again for being with us. Now, dear audience, I'm so pleased to welcome the next two speakers, Joachim and Englim. We met them actually physically at the World AI Cannes Festival a few weeks ago. These guys will rock it. Let me start with a quick intro. First with Joachim. Joachim is founding director of systems medicine at the German Center of Neurodegenerative Diseases and founding director of the Precise platform for single-cell genomics and epidemics. Joachim is an expert in macrophage biology and works at the interface between immunology, genomics, and the computational science. Why, I'm breaking my tongue. With his team, he was the first to apply memory-driven computing and swarm learning to medical research. His goal is to bring single-cell technologies and machine learning approaches to the clinical arena. He is leading several programs on applying single-cell technologies, memory-driven computing, and swarm learning to patients with Alzheimer's diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung cancer, or HIV. He has established research collaboration with HPE, Commasoft, Boehringer Ingelheim, Betcon, Dickinson, and other companies. With him on stage, we have Eng Lim, a great friend of ours in the meantime. I'm happy to welcome you on our virtual stage, Eng Lim, and introducing you to the audience. You are HPE Senior Vice President and CTO for AI. As principal investigator of the experiment aboard the International Space Station to operate autonomous supercomputer on long-duration space travel, you were awarded NASA's Exceptional Technology Achievement Medal. Congratulations on that. Your other work includes such as co-inventing blockchain-based swarm learning applications, which was featured of Nature, and overseeing deployment of AI to Formula One racing, one of my favorite use cases, as you know, and also the system architecture for simulating a biological detailed mammalian brain and predispositioning to vaccine side effects by machine learning and gene expression data. I must say, although I read through that a few times, it's not easy, those words. Extracting value from data is one common factor of all the above. You have the US patents with 3 other pending. Wow, dear audience, I could go on for very long. This is actually only a fraction of what I read about Eng Lim. What an amazing journey. We are glad to have both of you here sharing with us. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dalit. What I'll do is do a very quick introduction of the topic today, and then I'll invite Joachim to join me so that we can discuss the healthcare application specifically. So just a quick introduction, right? Today we'll be talking about a method of distributed learning, and ultimately the goal is to unite medicine around the globe. The way we'll be doing it is somehow figure out a way to share the learnings across different hospitals without sharing any data that is private. Right. Let me just go into that and give you a different example to start with before we go on to the healthcare example. So here is a slide showing a human on the bottom left of creating a star on Earth, not the movie star kind, an actual star on Earth, right? And that's the ITER program, where we're trying to get fusion energy, right? You know, the world is in need of more energy, and how we can do it sustainably, right? And fusion, not fission nuclear energy, but fusion nuclear energy, very difficult to solve. And in this case, they do a lot of computer simulation to try and keep the plasma, which is very hot, in the center of that device there. 2 trillion particles, 1,000 time steps, produces 200 petabytes of data, 200 petabytes. So if you imagine different centers around the world generating that amount of data, very difficult to bring all that data together, too much, right? So you don't want to move the data, but you want to do machine learning on each of them. So how do you do that? So that's the question I would like you to keep in mind. Let's now move on to the healthcare example. Here, you imagine you have 5 hospitals around the world. Not only do they have a similar problem where the data is too big to move around, they have the additional issue of not wanting or not able to share the data because of regulatory and privacy reason, rightfully so, right? So they can't share data. How do you then have them share their learnings if they have machine learning methods in each of these hospitals? How do you share the learnings without sharing any private patient data? That's the key question. In a previous example with fusion energy, the problem was the data's too big to move. In this current example, not only is the data too big to move, you also have the privacy issue of not being allowed to move it. Right? So this is how federated learning solves it. There is a beautiful solution to this by Google called federated learning. All right, this is how it works. You have 5 different hospitals around the world, same thing as before. And what you do is you put a machine learning model in each of them, and those machine learning models will learn locally, no sharing of data. They just learn on the data they have collected of their patients, maybe CT scans, maybe chest x-rays, maybe MRI scans, right? Learning from their own patients only, no sharing of any data. And then what happens is that you have a central coordinator collecting the learnings, not the data, just the learnings, and then averaging those learnings and then sending back the learnings of the machine learning models to those machines, and they continue learning locally again. So, and then after learning locally, the learnings are shared again with a central coordinator that averages all the learnings and sends it back up. So basically what happens in each hospital is this. You'll be learning locally of your private patient data. Machine will be learning locally, no sharing of data. And then once in a while, you will send up your learnings, your neural network weights, another way to say it, your learnings to a central coordinator. And what you get back is the globally averaged learnings across all the hospitals. So only sharing learnings, no sharing of data. And this is how federated learning allows you to share learnings without sharing any private patient data. But however, there was a number of questions brought up, right? If a hospital would like to join this network, they would feel more comfortable if there is no central coordinator that has there is a hospital being a central coordinator. In fact, that is more senior than them. They would like to have a more democratic system where everybody is equal, no central coordinator. Moreover, if you will have something in place of a central coordinator that can be more automated, that's not reliant on a central coordinator, that would be better. So all these questions came up, and we decided to work with DZNE, Joachim, to replace the central coordinator with a blockchain. And that essentially is swarm learning. And this is how it works. Each model will still be learning locally in each hospital, no sharing, right? And then once in a while, the blockchain smart contract will identify one of the hospitals to be the collector of all the learnings, averaging it, and then sending back the globally averaged one. And then all the hospitals will go on learning locally again, no sharing of data. And then the blockchain smart contract will assign the next hospital to be the global averager of all the neural network weights, the learnings, and then send back out the globally average one. So essentially, what we have is what we call swarm learning that replaces a physical central coordinator with a private permission blockchain, so that this system can be going on in a more automated way, and that all the hospitals will be democratically equal. We work earnestly with DZNE and Joachim's team on this, and Joachim is the last author of this swarm learning paper that was also published on the cover of Nature. It was a major achievement that we are very grateful for Joachim's and team's participation in this, teamwork in this. Oh, one side note, that we didn't know. If Nature says you can be on their cover, you're so happy, and then later they tell you you have to pay for the artwork of the cover. Right? We are happy to do it, but for those who are new to this, like us, is an interesting thing to note. Yeah. And this is a great time to then introduce and bring in Joachim. who can talk to you more about how it actually is applied to hospitals and how hospitals respond to this and the work we need to do to go in and work with them on this. Joachim, perhaps you could I hope you found our partnership fruitful. Yeah, it's been a long journey. And I first apologize ahead if there is a lot of back and forth and us interrupting you in your work, Joachim.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic that we discussed whether this would be possible. You said we have this new technology, and I think you nicely explained it. For some people that are more into the technology, they think it's a small step from federated to the swarm, because you said so nicely, it's a simple trick. You exchange the coordinator with the blockchain, but honestly, in medicine, I'm a medical doctor by training. That's a big change. It's a conceptual change, because as you said, it will not fly in the long term in medicine and in the healthcare system if you have one leading institution. You need this democratized version. So this is really from, does it work in the long term, to something that really works? And I'm convinced that it's only the democratized blockchain-based swarm learning. Federated will be transformed into swarm, because it is the model that we need in medicine. And so we had data that we knew that machine learning applied to this data will work in a central model. In the old-fashioned way, we collected hundreds of studies into a central repository. It took us years because of the reasons you told us. Get permission to the data, all these kind of things. And then, once we had established that, we had the ground truth that there is a signal in this. Machine learning will lead to a decision making that we find patients with leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood. And then we were in the right position to say, is this really working? And I think that was the nice thing also with having a very dedicated team, yours in industry and ours in academia, to really join forces, because we are so complementary. We bring things to the table that none of us could do alone. And that's what we did. And that made the big difference. And we could get all the young people really working extremely hard and long hours. And what we then showed is that if you have a couple of patients locally in your hospital and you learn a local model, it's okay, but it would not suffice for really bringing it to healthcare, because there you have to have a much higher accuracy and higher sensitivity and specificity for these tests. But when we then join via the swarm, as you said, the general merging of the parameters, this was the big difference. Then we came into a situation where you could think of developing medical tests based on AI. And it's about scaling. So what swarm learning does is the scaling of AI to medical care, to healthcare, to generalize models, and then really being able to engage many, many hospitals to understand how does AI actually behave in the real world, when you really apply it. Because you have the model, you can just increase the swarms. And I think if the medical sector is not engaging in that, is not looking for how the models are generalizing, how they behave in real world, we're not bringing it to healthcare. And that's what swarm can do.
And you said it that important point, right? That was the origin of what we thought that we should proceed with this path. Was that if each hospital were to be learning locally on their own private patient data, they would be biased towards the demographics of the patients they see.
Yes.
Then their wish would have been they could also get data from other hospitals to combine it to remove that bias. The problem of patient privacy means you can't do that. So now the swarm, you could actually do this, right? You can actually learn from each other. In fact, that's one way to say it. Learn from each other, where each has their own demographics of patients, and then you do a global learning without sharing any private patient data.
Actually, we found out that it's sometimes better than the central model, because what was interesting, that you actually neutralize these local biases, these local demographic issues. You're neutralizing them. You're favoring the ones that are true for all the places. So it's one way, when we talk about trustworthy AI, when we talk about responsible AI, where we really want to treat patients across the globe similar when you have one disease. Yeah. The diagnosis for certain of the cancers should be the same in the Americas, should be the same in Europe, in Asia, and so on. And of course, there will be flavors of how we generate the data and some circumstances that have an influence, but this is not what you want to have in the model. And Swarm, because it's going beyond that, can actually neutralize that. That's what we found also when we did the analysis.
And sometimes these biases came about because different hospitals use different type and sensitivity and resolution of equipment.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And then with Swarm, you again neutralize, you averaged it, yeah, so that you bring up those that have lower resolution and give them more learnings.
And the features and the weights and the parameters that are specific for the location, they're not generalizing, and they will be diluted out when you have the Swarm learning. And so we are really talking to many people now and many institutions, even institutions across countries, where they say, like, we want to enable our healthcare systems where we have already the hospitals standardized, then work together now, because we can leverage the data suddenly which are sitting in silos, but you can let them sit there because now we connect the silos via Swarm.
And you brought up the other point, right? If we were HPE and walked into a hospital or talked to a medical professional, we wouldn't be as credible as you in the field with them and talking to them. So on that point, I'm really glad, because we wouldn't have been able to do this on our own.
Yeah, and vice versa. When I come in and say, like, I would have done my own thing. I might not have the credibility, because they would say, like, is there a good industry partner that does really solid work? So the combination actually from medical field and the engineering and the IT is really that's key here. And I was so glad that we can do that together and continue doing that together.
Yes, let's bring this out, right? And try to get our theme, right? To unite hospitals of the world, right? That's the vision. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We are dreamers, but we try to be the doers also to achieve that dream.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great,
Thank
great.
you.
We definitely have two doers with great background, great companies and institutions in the background that are supporting this. There are quite some questions you can imagine, but before we go into the question, what I really liked is, I'm always a big fan of what you guys are doing. It's such a great step towards humanity also, and shows how AI really supports a human being, focusing on what we need, especially medicine. And we actually heard also from Jayant, who did the opening keynote from the World Economic Forum, when he was saying, like, more precise data modeling gives us more nuance, and it's getting more and more accurate. And this is now a use case where we see how that really works, especially when we don't need to actually have this trouble with privacy of the data. And what I also really liked is what you mentioned, without sharing private data and having neutralized actually the local biases. I think this is very important. And we're reading a lot, we see a lot, we're hearing a lot, but still, and I've heard you guys a lot already, and still I'm learning every time something new. And I think we really need to listen into the benefits, the small steps, how we can actually build it towards a better tool for humanity, especially in medicine. So I would like just to go into two questions. One is out from the audience. Sorry, I need some AI glasses, so I can read it directly. We have, how does or can swarm learning contribute to precision medicine?
Yeah, so what's very clear is, in medicine we're generating more and more data. You can probably, everybody has an X-ray of the chest already seen, and a CT scan maybe, but this is already a massive data. But we are conquering new data spaces, all the genomics. So we're looking at the genome, We're looking at how the genome is functioning. This is the transcriptome, epigenome, and so on. It's all massive data, and we cannot see them. We cannot smell them. We cannot sense them. Yeah? So we need computers to do this. And it's also clear now that normal computing is not sufficient. We need machine learning and artificial intelligence, deep neural networks to really make sense of this data at scale when we have many, many patients. Yeah. So it should become clear, if we really want to be precise and we want to use the data that we already can generate to high resolution and high content, we need to understand AI is the only way to do this. Yeah. So for me, having AI systems that give us really insights from these data that we cannot see and sense anymore is a key step towards precision medicine. And that means automatically systems like swarm learning are critical, because at the same time we have to protect our patients, their rights, and their data.
Mm. And I'll just add by saying that precision comes from massive amounts of data that you can then use to extract insights from. That's the first point. And from that, in order to achieve that, you need the sensors, right? All the scans and genomic data, gene expression data, and transcriptome data, bring them together. Now, the next point I want to bring is that the link between data, machine learning, and AI. And basically, I typically say it this way. Data is the source of a machine learning to be artificially intelligent. So it starts with the data. Good data, by the way.
Yeah, that's actually true. I mean, what we're working with our colleagues from the clinics and the hospitals, it's very important that we have good data to start. Yeah? That we're really working with good data and
but honestly, I mean, let's put it that way. The data need to be accurate. Doesn't matter if we're using Excel or if we're using AI. I mean, this is just independent. Sure. This is just a prerequisite. Let me just have another question that comes actually from the ETH Zurich and other universities who using semantic model to make a distributed health care data. Can you reflect on this approach versus swarm?
Yeah, I'll have Joachim might come in. I'll just give a quick comment on this. Yeah, look at swarm learning as just a network coming in to help you with sharing the learnings. So if you have semantic learnings across different sites, number one, and you have the problem of not being able to assemble all the data to train and learn locally because of privacy or because the data is too big, then swarm learning complements what you already are doing today by allowing you to share learnings in an automated and democratic way, right, without having to move the data.
And if I'm right, Englim, the blockchain also gives us much more security across making these networks. All the technologies right now, they are somehow secure, but the immutable of the process that brings the blockchain is really critical in this particular industry or in the healthcare sector.
Yeah, yes, I would like to finalize. Sorry, if I've just heard the word blockchain, and I think this is a very important point here. I mean, I understand that blockchains such as those used in Bitcoin, etc., can be energy intensive. And talking about the green energy and the topics of today, perhaps Englim, how do you deal with this with swarm learning?
Great point. So we don't use a public blockchain, right? That requires you to do a lot of authentication, a lot of energy use to solve puzzles, and then the winner of the puzzles win certification of that block and therefore get rewarded. We don't do that at all, right? We use a private, not a public, a private permission blockchain, right? And which means a registrar of all the allowed hospitals in this case, right, have to be kept. And then what you do is when a new hospital comes in, they need to get permission. So it's called private permission blockchain to enter that registrar. And any hospital in that registrar can join the network without any of the any further those what they do in cryptocurrency to get validation. Yeah.
So we even minimize it there, huh?
Yes. So it's fast, as Joachim says, it's fast and is very low energy requirement because all you have is a list of members of the swarm.
Right.
That's
Thanks. I mean, we could go on for hours. It's always great, but unfortunately, we are over time already. So happy me that I was able to a little bit to navigate. Please keep exchanging and sharing knowledge and your experience also with our audience. Dear audience, feel free to reach out to Joachim and Emily with your questions. And if you have hospitals and you would like to join them, then especially reach out. They're here to support. And at the end of the day, we support our own, the human beings. Thanks a lot for both of you and take care.
Dream to
See you
unite
soon.
hospitals of the world.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow. This is really always very shaking. Now it's time to move on to our next session, our last expert panel discussion of the day, focusing on AI-powered circular economy. For this, it is my great pleasure to welcome Thomas, René, David, Massimo, and Deepak on stage. Thomas, as you lead this discussion, let me introduce you to the audience first, just short and crisp. Most of you know Thomas already. He is a Swiss Cognitive Fellow chairing quite some of our panels with a touch of humor. Thomas, you are an expert in intelligent automation and AI systems. As a CEO and founder of Instrural.ai, you have solved the problem of creating content and engagement at scale. You are also a B2B technology influencer with over 169,000 followers on LinkedIn and the host of AI Nerd, AI with Attitude. Your YouTube channel? Thomas, welcome back on stage. It's always a pleasure to have you chairing one of our panels. With you, we have René. Welcome to our community and on our stage. It is our pleasure to have you with us, René. Let me introduce you to our audience. You are an AI ethicist, data activist, criminologist, criminal psychologist, and urban technologist. You specialize in ethical AI, AI leadership, algorithmic accountability, data integrity and sovereignty, algorithmic justice, AI policy, and AI governance. You're passionate about using AI to design ethical, real-time, and resilient solutions and committed to deploying AI to empower and sustainably transform cities, communities, and organizations. You are also a juvenile justice specialist, rehabilitation specialist, creative science communicator, and journalist. René, it's impressive what you've been doing, and we are all really happy to have you with us here today. David, welcome from Geneva and from United Nations. Let me introduce you to our audience too. So dear all, David is the coordinator of the Digital Transformation Sub-Program at the United Nations Environment Program. In this capacity, he is responsible for helping to accelerate UNEP's work on climate sustainability, nature protection, and pollution prevention using data and digital technologies. David has been advising the UN Science Policy Business Forum on digitalization sustainability since 2018 and was the co-author of a discussion paper entitled The Case for a Digital Ecosystem for the Environment. Prior to this work on digital transformation, he was a thought leader in a new multidisciplinary field of environmental peace building. David is also a founding board member of the Environmental Peace Building Association and has appeared on TEDx in the talk Natural Resources and Peace Building. Is the United Nations united? I have just been informed that David is late because his airplane has been late, so he will jump in as soon as he is here. With you on stage, we have Massimo. Massimo has been with Johnson & Johnson for 19 years, and in his current role, he is responsible for shaping and driving the technology agenda for Johnson's supply chain worldwide. He truly believes that technology is more than an enabler. It has become an integral part of the products you develop. It is about translating technology and data into business value. Massimo, our dear friend, a warm welcome to you too on our global stage. Another great panelist is Deepak. You are a thought leader in AI ML on a mission to democratize intelligence. You are a big proponent of transparency in machine learning, which is impressive for human-machine collaboration and creating a more equitable society. You are also a recognized leader in natural language processing and cognitive science applied to business. You pioneered quality of service for converged network with your patents and research leading to the implementation of voice video data networks at Bell Labs. You co-founded Amelia, an enterprise cognitive AI platform that is rated at the top by independent analysts and widely deployed at major enterprises globally. You also founded EasyML, the world's first transparent O2O ML platform, with several innovative features such as data bias detection, data SLA, and insights with accuracy scoring. Deepak, thank you for joining us today. Now, my great panelists, Tom will take over. The virtual stage is all yours.
Well, thank you, Dalit and Swiss Cognitive for letting me, it's always a risk when they put me up here. So thank you so much. Listen, first of all, just because David's late, it just means he's going to get all the action items from this. So if you're not in the meeting, you have to do all the work at the end of it. Standard corporate response. But good morning and afternoon to everybody. Before we kick off the conversation of sustainability, I really like to sometimes just define what that means in the context of your own world. And maybe I'll lead with you, Deepak, to say, talk about sustainability as it relates to AI.
Sure. Really good question, Thomas. So what is a sustainable enterprise and how does AI play a role in it? Traditionally, the moment people hear sustainability, all focus tends to environmental sustainability, right? And that's clearly very important given that we are in the midst of a climate change, rapidly evolving to a climate crisis. One quick fell swoop around the globe and you can see how times have changed and what upheaval it's causing, right? In terms of storms, fires, and floods, droughts. I don't want to belabor the point, but it's very obvious, including loss of biodiversity and the accompanying risk. So carbon neutrality is a big deal to environmental sustainability from an enterprise perspective, right? The fact that the enterprises must accomplish the same service or more, higher level of service, without contributing excessively to what has caused climate change. For instance, using excessive amounts of energy to do something that can be done without, if processes were more efficient. If processes were more efficient, that's a catchphrase. How can processes be more efficient so that enterprises can provide the same level of service or better without incurring all the expense that causes environmental impacts, adverse impacts? And so therein lies the AI contribution to environmental sustainability in the enterprise. Another big factor there that we'll talk about extensively is this recycling aspect. Being able to reuse, and it plays right back into the narrative of being able to provide the same kind of products and services without inventing everything afresh and renew and the problems that come with it. Environmental sustainability is one dimension, though, of what is a sustainable enterprise. And I'll very briefly mention the other two, and maybe we can discuss the impact of AI as we go along on those aspects as well. One is economic sustainability, and that is key because up until now, it was as if profit and economic sustainability and environmental sustainability were at loggerheads, not Care for the environment, sacrifice on profits? Not anymore. The two actually align rather well. And so we'll talk about economic sustainability for the enterprise and how AI and data-assisted decision-making is making that possible. Last but not least, and I know Renee is here and she would have a whole lot to talk about that, is social sustainability in the enterprise, right? Financial wellness, wealth inequality, racial justice, structural inequality, access to healthcare, right? All these things matter to people who associate with an enterprise, either as customers or as employees. Yeah. So various dimensions, environment, economic, and social, to what sustainability means for an enterprise and how AI impacts it.
And I think that's a great broad to jump us into some examples maybe. And, Renee, I'll come to you. Where are you seeing examples of the AI, AI and sustainability in the justice system today?
Thank you so much for that question. And of course, Deepak, a fantastic answer there. I think the justice system gives us great insight to sustainability, because when we're thinking about sustainability in AI, we're thinking about the deployment of algorithms. And we know when we're designing algorithms, we're designing for precision decision-making. And what happens in that regard is that these algorithms are making decisions about resources, about access to resources, about who will have the access and pretty much who will not have access to the kinds of resources. So what justice does, it gives us a perspective into fairness and algorithmic fairness and questions such as algorithmic injustice and how are we designing these algorithms and who are we designing these algorithms for and who is going to benefit from these algorithms. And when we're thinking about sustainability and AI and justice, we are thinking of concepts such as due process. And we are thinking of duty of care. And we are thinking of the ethical due diligence that is required to ensure the kinds of systems that we are designing and deploying, AI systems, are sustainable. And we're thinking about those long-term impacts. What are the long-term impacts of algorithms and AI on the economy, on the environment, on society? And we're thinking about how AI is enhancing or depleting the ecological system that we're all a part of. So I think what the justice system does is gives us a critical thinking approach to technology and data science and AI, because what we have seen in the justice system in particular are the ways that algorithms can behave, the ways in which algorithms can introduce bias and discrimination and systemic racism, and why we need to have this social justice and racial justice and just a diverse, equitable, and inclusive perspective. So when we think of justice, it brings that critical, divergent, innovative thinking that we need to understand that if we are building ethical systems, we are building systems that are not only fair, but accountable, transparent, auditable, and of course, explainable.
In corporate world, that's absolutely requirement and needs to, but I think even more so in the justice system, that I think that level of due diligence and that level of responsibility is even higher, just because of the nature of the outcome. Like one is, corporate profits, and other things are, people's lives and impact. So we'll circle back on the minority report and see if that's a reality yet on AI. I don't think it is quite. And Deepak, I keep seeing your clock in the background. It's hypnotic. I swear you could tell me to do anything at this moment and I would do it. I'm in a trance. And I think what you told me to go do, just implied it there. You might have used a little AI. But I want to hear what Johnson & Johnson's doing here. So Massimo, tell me about sustainability and how important it is to the company and how it relates to your mission as an organization.
Yeah, look, I think thanks Thomas for the question. I think great introduction from my other two colleagues here on the panel. So Johnson & Johnson has a long-standing commitment to sustainability that really goes at the core of our values. Because our ambition, the ambition of Johnson & Johnson, is really to change the trajectory of health for humanity. And there is a strong correlation between changing the trajectory of health for humanity and the entire sustainability concept. In a broad sense, the way that Deepak described it. I think most of you know that Johnson & Johnson, we always go back to our credo. Because our credo is really the framework that we use to take our decision. Our credo is really the document that calls out the responsibility that every J&J employee has towards patients, employees, community, and shareholders. And sustainability goes really across all these different four dimensions. That's why, I mean, back to your question, Thomas, we are aligning our forces, we are aligning our competencies, and we are also actually doing very active partnership within the industry and outside of the industry as well, in public and in private sector, to drive this agenda. So I think in a nutshell, to the question of how important is sustainability for a company like Johnson & Johnson, it's not only important, it's not only critical, it goes to the core value of the company that plays in the healthcare industry.
Yeah. And I can't wait to hear some examples you guys are doing, but I want to say hello to David. David, fresh off a flight, I'm sure you're just feeling swimmingly right now. So listen, talk about what's going on with the UN and how they're adopting these digital technologies kind of across its portfolio a bit.
Thomas, sorry, you broke up there when you were asking a question. So if you could just repeat it, that'd be fantastic.
I intentionally broke up to see if your AI could. I said, what's going on at the UN and the environment and the programs of what you have? How are these digital technologies being, take a couple minutes to talk about what's going on there, broad strokes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. I think, the Secretary General believes that digital technologies are going to be a huge part of achieving the SDGs. That goes without question. He's very excited about the opportunity space, and so is obviously the UN Environment Program. I think that, it's this sort of pivotal moment in human history, because digital technologies and AI could either be sort of the single most important opportunity to achieve sustainability, or they could be the biggest risk to accelerate some of the major trends that are driving planetary degradation and climate change. And so it's really this pivotal moment where we have to choose between these two pathways. And so absolutely, the Secretary General is keen to look at this and to try to broker a common vision, right? How do we collectively come up with a vision where we can use the good side of these technologies and minimize the downside? So at UN Environment Program, we've developed a new digital transformation strategy, and we're trying to use digital tools and tech to accelerate three of our areas. I mean, we're working on climate action, nature protection, and pollution prevention. So those are our three verticals. And then inside those verticals, we're looking at three different applications. The first is this big question of data, right? How do we start to monitor the environment on a global basis with respect to climate, nature, pollution, using all these tools and technologies? The second is then, once we have all of that data and those analytics about the globe and the environmental situation, how do we plug that into the digital economy, right? So how do we start to use that data to influence finance, influence supply chains, and influence consumer behaviors, and move all of those, shift all of those in the direction of sustainability? And then the final pillar is really about enabling governments, right? How can governments begin to use these tools to achieve their national development goals? And how do governments begin to catalyze and incentivize digital innovation ecosystems in their countries? So those are the three areas that we're working on, and we're very excited to be a part of this conversation.
And actually, you touched on something which I think is always important on any technology play or anything you do, is having a goal. But there's a prioritization of those goals. And maybe I'll go to you, Renee, of what are you seeing in your space, how goals are getting set, because you can't solve everything at once. So how are they picking, and maybe what are the top few goals in the justice system space or in that zone?
Thank you. I think in justice, it's about expediency. Of course, it is about equity. I think what we're seeing is that there are many AI projects that are coming into the justice space. What we are not seeing would be an ethical approach to designing justice products. We've seen the Justice Department saying it has given out millions, if not soon to be billions of dollars to organizations and to vendors to create justice tools. But they're really not tracking these tools to see what is the value that they're bringing to the justice model. So we're not seeing an enhanced or a more innovative business model to justice, or to just policing or sentencing or incarceration. But what we are seeing is a lot of activity in the space And what we are trying to do is looking at the things that are being procured and trying to bring an approach that is not only justice oriented, but an approach that is trauma informed. Because one of the things that we are seeing in the criminal justice system would be the transmission of intergenerational trauma through data. So if we want something that is regenerative and restorative, we've got to bring something that is ethical and something that really is inclusively innovative in the way in which it's being designed. So what we are seeing would be more of an interdisciplinary approach that's required to designing justice tech tools.
Yeah.
You know, I think you just named a really good name for a Netflix series in trauma, data, drama and data. I think I was like, that should be like a Netflix series. I'm sorry, Deepak. I had to jump in there because it was like, that's like a perfect future series on something. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, Renee made an excellent point there. You know, when she said dollars upon dollars being handed out to vendors, and we're not seeing the kind of impact to justice in terms of equality of delivery and as from these algorithms as one would expect. And, you know, Renee, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, there's a very real reason to that. The reason is that transparency in machine learning is still evolving. It's learning itself as it goes along. How do you make these complex data sets, these complex models come alive and start to tell their story? For instance, I'll give you a real for instance. Suppose the justice AI model, so to speak, right, makes a prediction about what to do for this particular instance. And Renee says, really, I kind of disagree with that. Why did you suggest that? The basis for that explanation of why it made that recommendation lies in training data. Now, is your data good enough? Or how did you make sure your data did not have the biases that it's reflecting in the reasons it's providing you? So garbage in, garbage out. Once you take care of that, do the vendors actually consider the training data in making those recommendations? So the point you made, there are so many things, loose ends to tie before you really start to see benefits. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for bringing it out.
We won't even go down how contracts are awarded in the U.S. government, because I think that could be a whole 16-hour show itself, just to understand the procurement process and the lack of need for delivery. But whole different thing. You know, let's get into a couple examples, and I would love to start with you, Massimo. Give me really like a real world example of what's going on, what's been, you know, maybe one that's been accomplished, or it's really close, or it's in production, so to speak, and what's maybe still in the science project level. For sustainability specifically.
Yeah, no, good, thanks. So I think let me really start by setting the scene on where sustainability, the overall sustainability program is positioned within Johnson & Johnson, because I think this goes back to one of the concepts that I think Deepak shared at the very beginning, because the sustainability program at Johnson & Johnson is part of the bigger framework that we call Health for Humanity. And you know, within Health of Humanity, we are not looking at sustainability only. We are looking at the global health equity, which is something fundamental, and we are looking at diversity and inclusion as well. So I think before getting into some examples, and I'm going to go there soon, is I really want to echo what Deepak said at the beginning. We need to be actually looking at sustainability bigger in a broader sense, next to dimensions like diversity and inclusion, and next to dimensions like global equity access as well, okay, which is fundamental. But now, talking about some specific examples, we have 3 clear commitments when it comes to the environmental sustainability of Johnson & Johnson. I mean, we are aligning all the programs, we are aligning the investment towards achieving those 3 key commitments. First one is renewable electricity. So we do have a commitment to have 100% of our electricity needs from renewable sources, which is something fundamental that we are aggressively working on across the globe. There is a clear commitment on carbon neutrality for our operations. You know, we are a global organization with a supply chain that span across all the continents, manufacturing sites, operation and distribution centers. We want to achieve 100% neutrality in terms of operations, and then emission reduction. Okay, really those three dimensions are paramount for us. But there is another dimension that is going to help me to give a specific example. When we look at sustainability, we believe that we need to cast a wider net and we need to go outside of the boundaries of Johnson & Johnson only. Let me say what I mean. We're looking at our suppliers as well. So we want to do business, and we are doing business with suppliers that have the same level of focus on sustainability as Johnson & Johnson does. So for every single supplier we are doing business with, well, we are enrolling them in our supplier sustainability program as well. So it's really moving outside of the internal companies and creating an ecosystem, a value chain that is sustainable by itself, not the company. And this is really paying off because we're actually a complete example. We were able to build a network of more than 200 companies. We're partnering with 200 companies within the industry and outside the industry on the new plastic economy global commitment. And by partnering, by creating this ecosystem, we are able to commit on significant improvement in terms of recycled plastic and paper. So we definitely have a clear commitment on having 100% of recycled plastic in our bottles for some of our products. But again, the key takeaway here is it's not about sustainability in terms of environment only, and it's not within the Johnson & Johnson world only. We definitely need to go outside and look at the entire ecosystem to build a sustainable model.
I mean, it clearly sounds like the investment being made is really helping you in these AI and emergent technologies to achieve business goals. And this is not technology for technology's sake. It's not an science experiment. It's really aligned. And if I'm stating this in a question statement, I mean, it really feels like it's achieving business goals in the near term and aligned to what would be strategic in the further term. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. And look, I just making another example to support that statement. Again, we do operate in a global supply chain across all the different continents. And in our logistic operations, the number of ocean flights and the number of trucks that we are loading every single day is a key topic for us. I mean, in the last years, we have deployed a data science, artificial intelligence, well, it's something between AI and data science solutions that is really helping us to automate, do load planning, to really have an optimized truck loading in ocean container. So this is driven efficiency, but to your point, Thomas, this is actually driving significant improvement in terms of our CO2 emission. So by optimizing our logistic network, not only we are being more efficient, but we have actually going up to a 20% reduction in Asia Pacific on our CO2 emission. So right, is really investing in technology to drive efficiency, but next to efficiency is more and more important the sustainability value case that technology is driving.
Got it. And maybe, we got about 7 minutes or so left before we tragically have to say goodbye to each other. But what I'd like to hear, though, to get going, it's always the next step, which sounds like it needs investment. And maybe I'll go to you, Deepak. Take a minute and a half talking about how your perspective is and what will be the initial impact of a really smart investment or a sizable investment or the right size investment. Just talk around it a little bit. What's it required to get going and sustain?
All right. No, good point. And it goes back to the point about economic sustainability, because the investment must generate a circular loop where it generates enough of revenues and profits to keep the momentum of innovation going. Used to be that there was a big, and I alluded to, a big tussle between profit at all costs versus how do we include sustainability and good environmental, economic, and societal factors that seemed like not aligning well at profit no matter what. Now there is an increasing realization that the two actually align really, really well. And it's long time coming. I'll give you examples why economic sustainability is front and center for all the big enterprises, J&J, as Massimo is saying, UN, as David, of course, Department of Justice, BlackRock, I can keep NASDAQ. Look at one aspect, investments. Many of these investments are today so fundamentally impacted by climate change, storms, fires, floods, hurricanes. That's tremendous damage and all the implications that has. Is it not wise for these large investment houses to make sure that investments pan out by trying to curtail these?
No doubt. I mean, and I want to make sure because I want to hear where the investment is. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off there, but no doubt that there's the impact is just not on one thing. And if you take that context, Renee, and you say, oh, this is how the investment's being found or being justified, so to speak, in the Justice Department. I mean, can you give me like maybe 60 seconds on that as well, just of where the investment's coming from, and or is there a trade-off? How's it happening in your world? Uh-oh, she's on mute. Play drinking game.
Thank you very much for that question. I think what we're seeing in the Justice Department is that we need more investment in areas where we could enhance that human system interaction with ethical AI. That's the challenge. There's a lot of investment, a lot of things are being designed, a lot of things are being deployed, but they're not being designed with that ethical approach to AI. Deepak spoke about transparency and spoke about pretty much that black box. And what we're seeing in the criminal justice system is that question of opacity with the algorithm, and that question about the black box, and whether it's about proprietary rights, and whether it's about trade secrets, or if it's about justice and due process. So there's an extraordinary amount of investment. What we're not seeing in the investment would be that ethical approach that is bringing systems into the justice system that are more resilient and are coming with more value in the design process. So it's happening, but how do we make it happen in a way that it could really impact society, communities, families, and individuals? And that's the big challenge right now for AI, its relationship with communities and society.
And Dave, I'll go to you. I mean, what's one of the is the investment the only enabler you're seeing to kind of harness this technology, or do you have is there something more that we're missing? Maybe give us 60 seconds on from the UN perspective of the enablers that are needed, maybe beyond investment.
Yeah, I think picking up on what Massimo said, the biggest enabler right now that we see is investment in the digital product passport standards, right? So every single product in the world should have like a QR code on it where all of the supply chain, the environmental footprint of that supply chain, the carbon footprint is inside this digital product passport, is inside this QR code, so that consumers can actually decide which products and services meet their values, right? Which products and services are more green, more sustainable. And we need to have that information inside some kind of digital product passport. So collaboration around the standards for global digital product passports for all goods and services in the world is number one priority on my list.
And if you think about the overall investment that's going into this, right, already in the sustainability, I think there's probably other words to describe it. We only about 90 seconds left. Massimo, I would ask you about the investment, but clearly Johnson & Johnson is doing a fantastic job of thinking to the future and actually executing on it. So, a tip of the hat to your organization and you guys, what you're doing there, because not everyone has that mindset. Not every company has that mindset for sure. So, little small round of applause for Johnson & Johnson. Just I'll give them a little plan. Everybody, let's do that because.
No, but if I can say something, and I don't want to spoil the agenda. To me, investment is one thing, but one word that I have not heard that is competencies. Technology is one thing, investment is the other things, but competencies. So we need to secure we have the right pipeline of competencies to continue driving this agenda. Technology and investment alone is not enough if we don't have competencies.
Right. And it's a great segue. Maybe it'll be a future bit that you'll take a lead panel on for sure, because I think there's so much we could discuss here, and it's like this little teaser across the board. But listen, we have about a minute left, and I really want to thank everybody for coming on and talking about this, because we're really at the beginning. We're at the nascent stages of this of investment needed to do this, to the mindset and thinking. There's so much change management and governance and things that'll have to go around that. And it's all being done at different levels, and now you're seeing it at UN, you're seeing it at Justice, you're seeing it in commercial and pharma, and then in startup at land and data. So thank you so much, by the way, everyone, for joining today. I wish we could continue this, but I think at some point Andy and Dolph are gonna pull the rug underneath us, and we'll just fall away. But thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you also from our side. And yeah, actually also we could I go on for hours listening to you guys. It's so much to share. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights. Thomas, you did a great job again, keeping this discussion going on and really taking the whole experience out of our panelists. And yeah, I'll be more than happy to have all of you again with us on stage, sharing your experience with our global audience. You guys did a great job. Have a fabulous day, morning, evening, wherever you are. And see you very soon. Thanks a lot, Rina, Massimo, David, Deepak, and Thomas. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now, dear audience, I can't believe it. We're heading to the last keynote. Yeah, with a very special person who will blow your mind. Literally? Well, you will see. What I can ensure for now is that we have a thought-provoking session coming up by Bruce, an incredible human being who sets no limits to imagination and possibilities. Bruce, welcome on our stage. My pleasure to have you here with us today. Let me introduce you to the audience. Bruce, you are the director of the Terrorism Movement Foundation. You are also project director for the Life Now North project and responsible for the ongoing development of Bina 48, one of the world's first advanced humanoid robots based on the mind file information of a real person. Ooh. You are also managing producer for Terrorism Media and Films, which produced the independent science fiction featured film To Be The Era of Flash Is Over. So now, Bruce, let me hand over to you for the session on sustainable AI future powered by human. Please take us into this world of yours.
Well, thank you, Dalith. And also I want to give a big shout out to everybody on the Swiss Cognitive team for getting us to this place. You've done an excellent job. It's been nerve-wracking. That picture of me that you saw in black and white where I seem to have a frown on my face is just waiting for something not to work. So I know we need precision. I know we need intelligence. And we also need a good amount of just good old-fashioned serendipity. So thank you for what you've done this day to bring us all together. Appreciate it. I'm going to give your brains a rest for a minute and bring us into just some pretty pictures and a few things to think about while I'm talking. So I'm going to do the share if I can manage that, which I usually get lucky with. And let's see here if I can get us back to the future. Okay, so the title of my talk is Sustainable AI Powered by Human Wisdom. Obviously, based on this talk that we've had together all day long, people have essentially pointed at all the ingredients of what is needed to create sustainable AI. And I'm just going to choose a small slice, which I actually think is one of the most important pieces, which is we want to have sustainable AI powered by what matters to human beings as a community. That means everybody, not just the people who are developing it, not just the people who are profiting from it, but all of us. And in order to do that, we need not just intelligence, but we know when to use that intelligence. So that's kind of my working definition of wisdom, is it's something that actually works out. I do want to have us entertain the idea of the phrase that comes from the engineering lab out of Canada called technological stewardship, when they talk about it's a behavior, it's an action that actually is used to make sure technology makes the world a better place. And it's equitable and it's inclusive, it's just and sustainable. Because if you've got a world that's built on anything less than that, I can guarantee you it won't be sustainable, even if it makes a profit and you can power it with the sun. If it doesn't make a place for human beings to thrive and to grow in the future as a community, as a planet, then people will resist it and they'll fight it. And in order to do this, I think we really have, those of us who are in the conversation professionally, I think we have to step up even more to do things like participate across disciplines in conversations and to influence the shape of this technology as it comes into being in an iterative sense. Maybe it'll happen overnight, but it's definitely happening. And that means we have to take a greater responsibility as leaders for this kind of conversation, for this justice. One of my definitions of leadership is it's leaders take action on the obvious. And for those of us who are obviously looking at concerns and challenges, we need to be transparent, accountable, and open about what we see and ask for help. Because embracing this role is really going to ask us to look at other people outside of our silos, so to speak, our expertise areas, to become our collaborators and to cooperate in ways that we've never really done it before as a whole planet to make this happen. I think whether you're a business leader, you're a coder, you're an engineer, you're a scientist, you're just someone who's selling hot dogs on the street, I think that you have the right to ask these two questions of yourself, your community, your profession, your leaders. One is, if you're going to solve this problem, whatever the problem that's being put forward, and I think climate change and ending poverty, ending war and violence as ways to solve problems are worthy problems. But we need to think about, if we solve the problem, what kind of world are we going to be creating? And, if it's inclusive and it's diverse and it's just, then, hopefully it'll be a world that we want to live in. If it's not, if it's Orwellian, as this is, graphic from George Orwell's novel depicts surveillance, then we're going to get something quite a bit less than what we would consider optimal growing conditions for human beings. I don't think we can talk about algorithms and data. Obviously, it's come up several times about the quality of the data, and the biases in the data need to be collaborated, and the data needs to reflect the diversity of the world as we know it, but also as we want it to be, that it hasn't occurred yet. And I think if you look at Afrofuturism and indigenous futures, writings and conversations that are happening now in the technology and art space, you can hear some very rich explorations of these ideas in terms of matter and quality and content of how we could be thinking about a future that works for everybody. I'll tell you a little bit about an experiment that we're doing that you could just say is not related to all of this, but it's related because we're going to use artificial intelligence at some point. We've created a decade-long, multi-decade experiment that started in 2006 called the TerraSim Mind Uploading Experiment. And we're really basically just trying to see if we can back up enough information about your personality, your consciousness, so to speak. Can we reanimate that in a good enough approximation of the original into something that's not based in a biological substrate, but something that's based in a silicon or a digital substrate? And if that's possible, if we can reanimate a good enough approximation of your mind, then that might free us to give it wings, to let it be downloadable to new platforms like an avatar, computer, robot, or cyberspace. And I think if you want to see a really interesting examination of, or example of that, is probably buy yourself a ticket to the ABBA voyage that's just debuted a few days ago in London, to watch the pop group ABBA perform in what they call ABBA avatars, which is an incredible achievement in terms of entertainment. And entertainment matters because it's one of the ways that we tell stories about what's important to us, and it's one of the ways we learn. So we're interested in this idea of pursuing the possibility that we'll be able to upload information, create these personal databases that are curated and owned by the people that create them, and that we're going to use algorithms that have been customized to work not just for a generic Siri or Alexa purpose, but to actually reanimate at a granular level the wisdom, the experience, the understanding of the world that comes from a life lived by an individual person. So it's analogous to going from a generic song to what we have today, which is you can find almost any kind of music and composition through the technology of the internet if you're interested. and you can listen to the diversity of humanity's song, which is so important, and I think makes us have a richer life. The final evaluation phase will be having a panel of appointed, trusted people, could be philosophers, lawyers, doctors, everyday people who, aren't focused on AI, but to give them the opportunity to talk to both our AI reanimated mind file and the person who created it in a way that's not secretive. That's why we call it an open Turing test. So that's the evaluation phase. And I think that'll happen in probably the next 10 years. We have about 65,000 people around the world who, for 100% free, you can still create a mind file at our website, which I put in a bibliography that's going to be shared with you. But we thought that it would be incumbent upon us to not just talk about this experiment too abstractly, but to actually develop an illustration of what would it look like if you could transfer some aspect of a person's personality, mannerisms, attitudes, beliefs to a non-biological substrate. So in this case, we asked our friend Bina Rothblatt to talk to me for about 100 hours. So I just did a sampling about her life, and we transcribed that into data that could be married with current databases like Stanford Word database, database processes that we're using to really bring her experiences into alignment with an algorithm that can sort through all of this and basically be a social representation of her. So this involved working with artists. We worked with David Hansen of Hansen Robotics, who is a sculptor trained at the Rhode Island School of Design. He took these life casts of Bina. And we even actually had Morgan Freeman showed up one day asking if he could speak with our robot. So we're kind of on a voyage of yes. So here's a small video for you to look at to meet both Bina the human and Bina the robot. So thank you, everybody. I just wanted to end by showing this is the picture of 3 generations of Rothblatt that might be able to keep telling each stories to each other. And I would say, in the end, sustainable AI basically will be beneficial to human beings if it's guided by our wisdom and ethics, which we already have inherent in us and available if we can listen to people and be as democratic and inclusive as possible. If we're on the lookout for its toxicity to human beings, all human beings, and that we can see the joyful diversity represented in it through the world that it supports. And finally, that it actually creates connection. So thank you very much. I really appreciated being asked to listen and also participate in this. And I'll hand it back to you all.
Wow, thanks a lot for this great
You're welcome.
insights and a total different view that we haven't shared it until now. And I'm very happy actually that our ways crossed and that we had the possibility to look into it. Perhaps you can also share this short movie with the audience. And I was thinking of, it's actually kind of a photo album of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
yeah,
I think if you remember that in industry and science, the language is facts, figures, and data. Amongst people who live in community, it's stories. Stories is the language of community. And if we don't want our broken present with all its deficiencies to become our future, we have to have the courage and the loyalty to the human spirit to speak up, to be a leader. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. And I would love to go on and discuss with you perhaps also later and invite you again on stage. And one thing that I was thinking during the whole time, and I mentioned my grandma already in previous sessions that we had, she just turned almost 102 last December when she then literally just fell asleep.
Wow.
And I would have loved to know what she would have said to such development. I mean, she went through a lot of technological development. She was an author and had her TV show and so on. So she was exposed to tech. Would be very, curious to know. And if I'm listening to what I just saw, I thought How nice would it be actually to have her kind of in this way? On the other hand, not sure where it's leading us to. So great, and thanks a lot.
I'll mention
Yeah.
that it might be possible if you want to bring her information together, you might be able to talk to her, at least to talk to her what she had learned up until now. But you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So again, thanks for being with us, for sharing this totally different view. And take care, stay safe, and see you very, very
Welcome.
soon, Bruce. Dear
Yeah.
audience, thank you. Dear audience, another more than 3 hours actually have passed, and I would like quickly to wrap up what we heard today. We've heard about from many great leaders and experts. In our first panel, we dove deeper into the topic of accountability. We learned that we cannot achieve sustainability goals without moving towards responsible AI. That we increasing accountability and addressing ESG challenges. We also learned about, in relation to applying AI to climate issues, we heard the importance of open, sustainable data, which will have a great scientific and social benefit. We heard how it's all about efficiency when it comes to green AI, and how using its predictive and preventive capabilities presents a huge, strategic advantage when it comes to supply chain challenges. An interesting example that was presented is how consumers can be warned about potential water leakage long before they would notice it themselves. In relation to healthcare, we heard about swarm learning, which use cases a decentralized coordinator on the blockchain to share learnings between hospitals without sharing any private data. We heard that we are at a defining point when it comes to the development of AI and sustainability, and that now is the time to take action. Finally, we heard that sustainable AI needs to be powered by human wisdom, and that data should not only reflect the diversity that we have, but that we want in the future. So from our side, again, thanks a lot. I think we definitely, again, need to be aware that not everything that can be solved in a technological way must be, or we want to have solved. So at the end of the day, we are driving it in a responsible, transparent, and ethical way. It's on us. Now, talking about that on a personal note, you won't believe, but if any one of you out there has a good contact to Arnold Schwarzenegger or to his foundation, please reach out to us. We would love to demystify AI together with him. We saw a lot, again, how AI can support the human being, make our life healthier, safer, and easier. So reach out to us if you have any contacts there. Now, our next virtual event will take place July 6th about the role of leadership in the advancement of AI, how leaders can drive culture shift that accelerates acceptance, adoption, and scaling of AI in order to augment human capabilities and create new possibilities. If you are an expert and want to share your or your company's experience, please reach out to us. With that, again, thanks a lot for being with us, and sorry for all my notes in my tongue, but I'm not an avatar. I'm the lit. I'm here with you talking for 3 hours. I hope you got a lot of takeaways, and we're looking forward to seeing you in real. Let us know when you're around Europe, around Switzerland. We'll be more than happy to meet you in person now when we can, and we will let you know when we are traveling. Take care and stay safe. Bye.